Tom Princely, 52 years old, was the well-respected principal of Lexington Christian Academy, a small private school in the heart of Kentucky's affluent suburban neighborhoods. Known for his unwavering dedication to both his work and the community, Tom had a reputation for fairness, kindness, and a passion for education. His love for restoring historic homes was more than a hobby. It was a calling. Over the years, he had meticulously restored several of the area's grand old houses, breathing new life into the historic architecture of Lexington. Tom was married to his second wife, Olive Princely, after a bitter divorce from his first wife, whose criminal activities as a drug dealer selling prescription drugs to other soccer moms had brought shame and scandal to the family. Despite this rocky past, Tom had worked hard to rebuild his life, focusing on his two children from his first marriage, Martin, 21, and Bree, 18. However, Tom's professional success came at a personal cost. He was often absorbed in his work, spending long hours at the school and on restoration projects. This dedication made him a somewhat distant husband and father, leaving Olive feeling neglected and unloved. Yet beneath this busy exterior, Tom was unaware of the storm brewing within his own home. Olive, feeling increasingly bored and resentful of Tom's emotional distance, had started a secret affair with his son Martin. This illicit sexual relationship had grown into a dangerous obsession, leaving Olive down a dark path. In the days leading up to his death in early April 2017, the seemingly perfect life Tom had built was about to come crashing down, shattering the peace of the quiet neighborhood he had worked so hard to be a part of. On the morning of April 5, 2017, the quiet suburban neighborhood of Lexington, Kentucky, was shaken by a grim discovery. At around 7:30 a.m., Bree Princely, Tom's 18-year-old daughter, returned home after spending the night at a friend's house. Bree had been out late studying for a big exam at Henry Clay High School, where she was a senior, and had stayed over at her friend's place to avoid the early morning commute. As Bree walked into the living room of her family's historic home, she immediately sensed something was wrong. The room, usually spotless, was in disarray. A chair was knocked over, and there were papers scattered across the floor. Then her eyes fell on the most horrifying sight she had ever seen. Her father, Tom Princely, lying motionless on the floor near the fireplace. His head was covered in blood, and a heavy iron fireplace poker lay beside him, also stained with blood. Bree's heart raced as she froze in shock, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. After a few moments, she managed to pull out her phone and dial 911, her hands trembling as she tried to explain to the operator what had happened. The dispatcher, hearing the fear in Bree's voice, quickly sent emergency services to the scene. When the first responders arrived, Bree was standing outside the house, pale and shaking. She was in a state of shock, unable to speak coherently. The paramedics rushed inside, but quickly realized there was nothing they could do. Tom Princely was already dead. The scene was chaotic, with signs of a struggle, but it was the bloodied fireplace poker that told the story of how Tom had met his end. As Bree was gently guided into an ambulance for medical evaluation, the police began their investigation. The officers on the scene knew they were dealing with more than just a simple burglary gone wrong. The violence of the attack and the staged appearance of the crime scene immediately raised red flags. Bree's discovery of her father's body marked the beginning of a complex and shocking investigation that would soon uncover the dark secrets hidden within the Princely family. The Lexington Police Department arrived swiftly at the Princely residence after Bree's frantic 911 call. It was just after 8:00 a.m. on April 5, 2017, when officers pulled up to the stately historic home, nestled among the horse farms and tree-lined streets that characterized the affluent neighborhood. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns, but the peaceful scene outside sharply contrasted with the horror that awaited inside. Detective Frank Mullins, a seasoned investigator with over 15 years on the force, led the team. Known for sharp instincts and meticulous attention to detail, Mullins had seen her share of crime scenes, but something about this one felt off. As she entered the living room, the first thing that struck her was the amount of blood. Tom Princely's body lay near the fireplace, his head caved in by the heavy iron poker that now lay discarded beside him. The room was in disarray, with overturned furniture and papers strewn across the floor, but Mullins noticed that some things didn't add up. The scene appeared to be a botched robbery, with a missing laptop and a few scattered bills suggesting a possible motive. However, Mullins's experience told her that the scene was too staged, too perfect in its chaos. The front door showed no signs of forced entry, and nothing of real value, such as the expensive antique clock on the mantel or the flat-screen TV, had been taken. It was as if the killer wanted the police to believe it was a simple home invasion gone wrong. As the forensic team began their work, Mullins directed them to dust for fingerprints and search for any other evidence that might have been overlooked in the apparent struggle. They used luminol to check for blood that might have been cleaned up, and sure enough, traces were found leading from the living room to the bathroom, indicating that the killer had attempted to wash away some of the evidence. The medical examiner arrived shortly after and confirmed what Mullins already suspected. Tom Princely had been killed by blunt force trauma to the head. The force of the blows suggested a great deal of anger or desperation. Mullins knew this wasn't the work of a random burglar. This was personal. As the investigation continued, Mullins' suspicions grew. The crime scene was too carefully crafted, and the brutality of the attack pointed to someone with a deep-seated motive. The detectives on the scene exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that the investigation was going to be anything but straightforward. The peaceful, upscale community of Lexington was about to be rocked by revelations that would expose the dark undercurrents lurking beneath its polished surface. Detectives turned their attention to Olive Princely, Tom's 40-year-old second wife, as their primary suspect in the murder of Tom Princely. Olive was a stay-at-home mother who had always been known for her polished appearance and social grace. She was often seen at local charity events and community gatherings in Lexington, Kentucky. However, beneath her composed exterior, Olive harbored deep insecurities and fears, particularly about her past. Raised in a poor household where food was not a constant, Olive had once worked as an exotic dancer, a fact she kept hidden because of the extremely strict and conservative values of the community she lived in. In Lexington, any hint of scandal could result in severe public backlash, including physical punishment such as whippings for perceived immoral behavior. Olive's fear of her secret being exposed was a significant factor in her life. But when Detective Frank Mullins first questioned Olive, she presented herself as a grieving widow. Her voice trembled as she recounted the events leading up to Tom's death. Olive claimed she had been upstairs sleeping off a bottle of Cabernet when the attack occurred, only discovering the scene when she heard Bree's shrill screams. Olive insisted she had no idea who could have done such a thing, repeatedly emphasizing how much she loved her husband and how shocked she was by his brutal murder. Despite Olive's seemingly genuine grief, Detective Mullins couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Olive's story was just a bit too rehearsed, and her tears seemed to appear on cue. When Mullins asked Olive about her relationship with Tom, Olive admitted they had their problems but insisted they were working through them. She described Tom as a distant husband, but said she had always supported him, even during the difficult times. However, as the police dug deeper, they began to uncover troubling details about Olive's life. A search of her phone records revealed frequent calls and sexually explicit text messages to Tom's 21-year-old son, Martin. The messages were more than flirtatious and were at times explicitly sexual, detailing their liaisons in graphic detail, raising suspicions that Olive and Martin were more than just family. When confronted with this evidence, Olive's demeanor shifted. She became defensive, insisting that the messages were harmless and that she was simply trying to support Martin through a rough patch. But the police weren't convinced. Olive's growing resentment toward Tom, coupled with her inappropriate relationship with Martin, provided a possible motive for murder. As the investigation continued, Olive's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The police started to view her not as a grieving widow, but as a prime suspect in Tom's murder. The more they learned about her, the more they believed that Olive was hiding something, and that her secret might be the key to solving the case. The second person the police turned their attention to was Martin Princely, Tom's 21-year-old son from his first marriage. Martin had recently moved back home after being expelled from Arizona State University for drunken behavior and making sexual threats toward female students. Despite his charm and good looks, which he had inherited from his father, Martin had a troubled history, perhaps influenced by his birth mother who was a drug dealer. He struggled with finding direction in his life, bouncing from one failed class to another, and had a reputation for getting into trouble. Martin's relationship with his father was strained, with Tom often expressing disappointment in his son's lack of ambition and direction. When Detective Frank Mullins sat down to question Martin, he was cocky and dismissive. He admitted to the police that he had a bleeping complicated relationship with his father, but denied any involvement in Tom's murder. Martin described his father as a strict and often distant figure who freely spanked his kids and had always put work before family. He claimed that Tom's death, while tragic, didn't come as a shock given the stress his father had been under, and suggested it was a suicide. However, Martin's attitude changed when the police brought up his relationship with Olive. Initially, Martin tried to downplay it, claiming that his moo-moo mommy Olive had been supportive during his many rough patches, and was the only mother he had as his birth mother was in prison. But as the questioning continued, it became clear that the relationship was far from some cutesy-inspiring thing. Martin eventually broke down and admitted that he and Olive had been involved in a sexual relationship for several months. He shrugged it off as a casual fling, claiming he was in it for the, quote, free sex, and insisted it was no big deal. Despite Martin's nonchalant attitude, the police saw his relationship with Olive as a potential motive. If Tom had discovered the affair, it could have led to a confrontation, giving Martin a reason to want his father out of the picture. However, Martin maintained that he had nothing to do with Tom's death, and that the affair was just a distraction from his otherwise aimless life. Detective Mullins noted Martin's lack of genuine emotion when discussing his father's death. His cavalier attitude and refusal to take responsibility for his actions only raised more red flags. But without solid evidence linking him directly to the crime, the police couldn't arrest him yet. Still, Martin remained a person of interest, especially given the growing tension between him and Olive, and the volatile nature of their secret affair. The investigation into Tom's murder was far from over, and Martin's role in the case was becoming increasingly murky. The third person the police questioned was Bree Princely, Tom's 18-year-old daughter and Martin's younger sister. Bree had been the one to discover her father's body, and her initial shock had quickly turned into suspicion. She was convinced that Martin had something to do with their father's death. Bree and Martin had never been close, and their relationship had grown even more strained in recent months. Bree was a sharp, independent young woman, set to graduate from high school in just a few months. She was planning to attend the University of Kentucky in the fall, where she intended to study psychology. Unlike her brother, Bree had always been focused and driven, with a clear sense of what she wanted from life. When Detective Frank Mullins interviewed Bree, she found her to be articulate and composed, despite the trauma she had just experienced. Bree was adamant that Martin was involved in their father's murder. She described how Martin had been acting strangely in the weeks leading up to Tom's death, frequently arguing with their father and spending more time at home than usual. Bree also mentioned the growing tension between Tom and Olive, though she hadn't been aware of the full extent of their marital problems. Bree's suspicions didn't stop at Martin. She also expressed concern about Olive's behavior, noting that her stepmother had seemed unusually calm in the aftermath of the murder. Bree described how Olive had taken control of the situation, calling the police and informing the neighbors before Bree had even processed what she had seen. To Bree, Olive's actions seemed too calculated, too rehearsed. As the investigation progressed, Bree's own relationship with Olive came under scrutiny. Olive had used her charm and manipulative tactics to exert control over Bree, creating quite the complicated situation. Despite being a victim in many ways, Bree was drawn into Olive's web of deceit. Eventually, Bree became involved in a brief sexual affair with Olive, a fact that came to light during her interviews with police. This relationship was part of Olive's broader attempt to manipulate those around her and maintain control before and after Tom's death. Bree's insights painted a troubling picture of the dynamics within the Princely household. The police began to consider the possibility that both Olive and Martin were involved in Tom's murder, perhaps working together to eliminate him. Bree's testimony added another layer of complexity to the case, suggesting that the murder was the result of a tangled web of family tensions and secret relationships. Despite her strong suspicions, Bree had no concrete evidence to prove Martin's or Olive's involvement. However, her observations provided the police with valuable leads, prompting them to dig deeper into the lives of both Martin and Olive. The investigation was becoming increasingly complicated, with Bree's testimony serving as a crucial piece of the puzzle. On the morning of April 18, 2017, the investigation into Tom Princely's murder took a crucial turn. The weather was unseasonably warm for early spring in Lexington, with clear skies and a light breeze. Detective Frank Mullins was back at the Princely residence, meticulously combing through the living room for anything the initial sweep might have missed. The case had stalled, with no solid evidence tying any of the suspects, Olive, Martin, or Bree, to the crime. But Mullins was determined to find the missing link. As she was about to call it a day, Mullins noticed something odd about the fireplace. The mantel was dusted clean, except for a small, almost imperceptible smear near the base. It was easy to overlook, but Mullins's keen eye caught it. She called in a forensic team to take a closer look. They carefully removed the fireplace poker, which had already been identified as the murder weapon, and began to dust the area for prints. What they found was a partial fingerprint, faint but legible, on the underside of the poker, something that had been missed in the initial investigation. The fingerprint was sent to the lab for analysis, and within hours they had a match. It wasn't Tom's, Olive's, or Martin's. It was Bree's. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation team. Bree had been vocal about her suspicions of Martin and Olive, but now the evidence pointed to her. This new piece of evidence forced the police to reevaluate Bree's involvement in the case. Could she have been more involved than she let on? Detective Mullins was hesitant to jump to conclusions. Grease prints on the poker could have been left there innocently after all. She lived in the house and could have handled the poker at any time. But the timing was suspicious. Why would Bree's fingerprints be on the murder weapon, especially in such an unusual spot? Mullins's team decided to bring Bree in for another round of questioning. This time, they pressed her harder about her actions on the day of the murder. Bree maintained her innocence, insisting she had nothing to do with her father's death. But her story had small inconsistencies, and the new evidence made it impossible to completely rule her out. As the investigation continued, the police knew they needed more than just a partial fingerprint to build a case. But the discovery had cracked the investigation wide open. Now, with Bree under increased scrutiny, the detectives were more determined than ever to piece together the truth behind Tom Princely's murder. On April 19, 2017, the investigation into Tom Princely's murder took a decisive turn. After the discovery of Bree's fingerprints on the fireplace poker, the police focused their attention back on Olive Princely, Tom's wife. Despite Bree's prints on the murder weapon, something about Olive's demeanor during questioning had never sat right with Detective Frank Mullins. Olive had been too calm, too rehearsed. And then there was the strange relationship with Martin, Tom's 21-year-old son, that kept coming up in interviews. The breakthrough came when police obtained Olive's phone records, which revealed a series of deleted text messages between Olive and Martin in the days leading up to Tom's death. The messages were flirtatious and hinted at a deeper, more troubling relationship. One message from Olive, sent just 2 days before the murder, read, "Soon, it'll just be us, and we can finally be free." Another from Martin, responding, said, "I can't wait. He's in the way." These messages provided a clear motive. Olive wanted to be with Martin, and Tom was the obstacle in their path. The detectives confronted Olive with the evidence. It was April 20, 2017, a bright and sunny afternoon, when Olive was brought into the Lexington Police Department for what would be her final interrogation. The once composed and graceful Olive began to crack under pressure. She denied any involvement at first, but eventually started to unravel as the questioning intensified. Detective Mullins pushed Olive on the inconsistencies in her story and the damning text messages. Olive's calm facade broke, and she began to cry. In a moment of desperation, she confessed, "I couldn't stand it anymore. Tom was suffocating me. I needed to be with Martin. We were meant to be together." Olive admitted to planning Tom's murder, staging it to look like a robbery gone wrong, and even trying to manipulate Bree into taking the fall by planting her fingerprints on the poker. With her confession, the police had everything they needed. Olive Princely, 40 years old, was arrested on the spot for the murder of her husband, Tom. The news of her arrest shocked the community, especially those who knew the Princely family. Tom's children, Bree and Martin, were devastated, with Martin refusing to believe his stepmother could be capable of such a heinous act, despite the evidence. The case had come full circle, and justice was finally within reach. Olive's arrest marked the end of a twisted love triangle that had destroyed a family and left a community in shock. The trial of Olive Princely began on October 15, 2017 in Lexington, Kentucky. The case drew considerable media attention due to the shocking nature of the crime and Olive's seemingly perfect public image. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious locals, and Tom Princely's grieving family. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Helen Morgenstern, a 45-year-old attorney known for her dedication and clear, compelling arguments. Morgenstern outlined Olive's motive in her opening statement, focusing on Olive's secret affair with Tom's son Martin and her desire to be free from Tom's control. Morgenstern detailed how Olive had meticulously planned the murder, staging the crime scene to look like a botched robbery. She emphasized the chilling text messages between Olive and Martin, which revealed their intentions and desire to be together. In contrast, Olive's defense attorney was Robert Hughes, a 52-year-old lawyer known for his calm and methodical approach. Hughes argued that Olive's confession was coerced and that there was insufficient evidence to prove her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. He painted Olive as a woman driven to extreme measures by an unhappy marriage and emotional turmoil. Hughes claimed Olive's confession was a result of the intense pressure from the police and her distressed state of mind. As the trial progressed, Tom's family watched with heavy hearts. Ree and Martin were visibly upset, struggling to come to terms with their stepmother's betrayal. Ree's face was often buried in her hands, while Martin appeared numb, still in disbelief that someone he had trusted could commit such a crime. On October 25, 2017, after several days of testimony and deliberations, the jury returned with a verdict. Olive Prinsley was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as Judge Richard Blake announced the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was met with mixed emotions. Some felt it was a just punishment for her crimes, while others believed it was too harsh. Tom's family was relieved that justice had been served but remained deeply affected by the loss. The verdict marked the end of a tragic chapter for the Prinsley family, and Olive's conviction served as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of unchecked desires and deceit. After Olive Prinsley's conviction, the lives of everyone involved were profoundly changed. The trial's end did not bring an easy resolution for the people affected by Tom Prinsley's murder. Olive Prinsley was transferred to the Kentucky State Penitentiary, a maximum security facility known for housing dangerous criminals. Her once glamorous life had come to a stark and unglamorous end. Olive faced the harsh reality of prison life. With its daily routines and stringent rules, she had lost everything she held dear: her freedom, her marriage, and her reputation. Olive's case continued to be a topic of immediate interest, with many newspapers and news stations covering her transition from a community figure to a convicted murderer. Martin Prinsley struggled to cope with the fallout from the trial, but 21-year-old was left with the painful realization that his actions and relationship with Olive had contributed to a tragedy. He was also dealing with the stigma of being associated with such a high-profile case. Martin tried to move on by seeking counseling and focusing on rebuilding his life, though the shadow of the scandal followed him wherever he went. Ree Prinsley, Tom's 18-year-old daughter, faced her own set of challenges. The ordeal had taken a toll on her emotionally and psychologically. She was determined to honor her father's memory and avoid letting the tragedy define her. Ree chose to focus on her education and career, hoping that moving forward with her life would help her find some peace. She found solace in speaking out about her experience, participating in local events and discussions to raise awareness about domestic violence and familial betrayal. The Prinsley family's case remained a sobering reminder of how personal relationships and hidden grievances could lead to devastating consequences. As the months passed, the community began to heal, but the memory of Tom Prinsley and the impact of Olive's crime lingered as a cautionary tale about the dark side of human nature. Leah Brewster was a 40-year-old woman known for her creative talents and big heart. She lived in a cozy house in a friendly neighborhood in Austin, Texas. Leah worked as an interior designer, using her keen eye for detail to transform homes and businesses into beautiful spaces. She had a degree in interior design from the University of Texas at Austin, where she was an active member of the Student Art Society. Leah was not just talented, she was also very caring. She often volunteered at local shelters like the Austin Animal Center and organized community events. For instance, she was a key figure in setting up the annual spring fair at the local park, where families enjoyed food, games, and live music. Her friends described her as the heart of their group, always the one to plan get-togethers and make everyone feel welcome. She had a close-knit group of friends who often met up for brunch at popular spots like Kirby Lane Cafe. At home, Leah was the glue that held her family together. She was married to Bobby Dean Brewster, an accountant, and they had an 18-year-old son named Caleb. Leah and Caleb were particularly close, often spending weekends together hiking in the Barton Creek Greenbelt or watching Marvel movies. In the days before her death, Leah was very busy but also very excited. She was planning a big community fundraiser for the local homeless shelter. She spent hours designing posters and flyers, and she even managed to get a local radio station, QDigX, to promote the event. Leah also had dreams of expanding her interior design business. She was in talks with a local magazine, Austin Monthly, to feature some of her work. Her future seemed bright, and she was looking forward to all the possibilities. Leah's personality was warm and generous. She was the type of person who would go out of her way to help a friend in need or to make a stranger feel welcome. Her friends and family knew her as a selfless, loving person who always put others first. But her tragic death would leave a deep void in the hearts of those who knew her. On the morning of March 12, 2018, the usually quiet neighborhood in Austin, Texas, was shattered by a gruesome discovery. At around 8:30 a.m., Leah Brewster's neighbor, Liesl Gonzalez Chan, decided to drop off some homemade tamales. Liesl and Leah often exchanged baked goods and shared morning coffee. As Liesl approached Leah's front door, she noticed it was slightly ajar. Thinking nothing of it, she knocked and called out Leah's name, but got no response. Concerned, Liesl stepped inside. She walked through the hallway, calling for Leah. As she entered the kitchen, she was met with a horrifying sight. Leah was lying on the floor in a pool of blood, motionless. The kitchen, usually spotless and filled with the smell of Leah's cooking, was in complete disarray. Liesl froze in shock, her mind struggling to process the scene in front of her. After a few moments, Liesl snapped out of her daze and fumbled for her phone. Her hands trembled as she dialed 911. The operator, sensing her distress, tried to calm her down and asked her to describe what she saw. Liesl's voice shook as she explained that her friend was lying on the kitchen floor and wasn't moving. The operator assured her that help was on the way and instructed her to wait outside until the police arrived. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air, and 2 police cars pulled up to the house. Officers quickly secured the area and entered the home. Liesl, still in a state of shock, was gently led away by a kind officer who asked her to sit down and take deep breaths. She was offered a blanket and a bottle of water as she tried to calm down. As news of the discovery spread, neighbors gathered outside, whispering and speculating about what had happened. The local news station, KXAN, soon arrived, and reporters began setting up their cameras. The neighborhood was buzzing with fear and curiosity, as everyone wondered how such a tragedy could occur in their peaceful community. Leah Brewster's body was carefully examined by the first responders. They confirmed she had been stabbed multiple times with a kitchen knife, which lay beside her. The brutality of the crime shocked everyone present. Liesl, still trying to comprehend the horror she had witnessed, provided a statement to the police. She described Leah as a wonderful person and expressed her disbelief that something so terrible could happen to someone so kind and loving. In the following hours, forensic teams arrived to start their investigation, marking the beginning of a long and complex case that would uncover dark secrets and hidden motives. The police arrived quickly at Leah Brewster's house on the morning of March 12, 2018, after Liesl Gonzalez-Chan's frantic 911 call. Officers Joseph Costella and Ithiel Rivera were the first on the scene. Arriving within minutes, they were experienced detectives with the Austin Police Department, known for their dedication and sharp investigative skills. As the officers entered the house, they were struck by the chaotic scene in the kitchen. The normally tidy room was in complete disarray, with broken dishes on the floor and blood splattered across the counters and walls. Leah Brewster lay on the kitchen floor in a pool of blood, with a kitchen knife nearby. It was clear that she had been stabbed multiple times, and the brutality of the attack was evident. Detective Costella, a tall man with a stern expression, immediately began assessing the scene, while Detective Rivera, known for her keen attention to detail, started documenting everything with her camera. They carefully examined the area around Leah's body, noting the signs of a struggle. The kitchen table was overturned, and a chair was broken, indicating that Leah had fought hard against her attacker. The detectives called in the forensic team, who arrived shortly after. The team used advanced tools to gather evidence, including swabs for DNA, fingerprint dusting kits, and high-resolution cameras to capture every detail. They meticulously collected samples of blood and other potential evidence, hoping to find clues that would lead them to the murderer. Detective Rivera noticed a set of muddy footprints leading from the back door into the kitchen. She pointed this out to the forensic team, who took detailed photographs and measurements. The footprints suggested that the killer had entered the house through the back, possibly trying to avoid detection. Detectives Costella and Rivera continued to work late into the night, reviewing the evidence and planning their next steps. They knew that solving Leah's murder would require thorough investigation and attention to every detail. The scene in Leah Brewster's kitchen was a puzzle they were determined to solve, piece by piece, to bring justice for Leah and her grieving family. The first suspect in the investigation was Caleb Brewster, Leah and Bobby Dean's 18-year-old son. Caleb was a high school senior with a bright future ahead of him. He was a popular student at Austin High School, known for his talent in basketball and his ambition to study engineering in college. His teachers spoke highly of his intelligence and dedication, and he had already received several scholarship offers. Caleb had a complicated relationship with his father but was very close to his mother. Leah was his biggest supporter, attending all his basketball games and helping him with college applications. However, there was a secret Caleb had been hiding. He was involved in a sexual relationship with his high school English teacher, Laura McMasters. Leah had just recently discovered this relationship before her death, which caused tension in the household. When detectives Joseph Costella and Ithiel Rivera brought Caleb in for questioning, he appeared nervous but cooperative. He admitted to the relationship with Laura McMasters, explaining that they had grown close over the past year. He described Laura as supportive and understanding, someone he could confide in about his struggles at home and school. The detectives asked Caleb about the night of his mother's murder. He claimed he was at a friend's house studying for an upcoming exam. His friend, Jason Kim, confirmed Caleb's alibi, saying they had been working on a physics project together until late in the evening. However, the detectives were not entirely convinced and continued to press Caleb for more details. Caleb's nervousness grew as the interrogation continued. Detective Rivera, known for her empathetic approach, asked Caleb about his feelings towards his parents, especially after Leah discovered his sexual relationship with Laura. Caleb admitted that his mother's reaction had been harsh, and they had argued about it. He felt guilty for causing his mother distress, but insisted he had no reason to harm her. The police found explicit text messages on Caleb's phone between him and Laura McMasters, discussing their sexual relationship and Leah's disapproval. The messages revealed a deep bond between them and their fears about the future. Caleb expressed his frustration with his parents, but never hinted at any violent intentions. Despite his alibi, the police considered Caleb a person of interest. His sexual relationship with Laura McMasters and the tension at home provided potential motives. The detectives decided to keep a close eye on Caleb, reviewing his social media and phone records for any additional clues. Caleb's friends and teachers were shocked to hear about the investigation. They described him as a bright, ambitious young man with a promising future. The community couldn't believe that someone like Caleb could be involved in such a tragic event. The detectives, however, knew that appearances could be deceiving and continued to scrutinize every aspect of Caleb's life for answers. The second suspect in Leah Brewster's murder investigation was her husband, Bobby Dean Brewster. At 45 years old, Bobby Dean was known for his meticulous and highly organized nature. He worked as an accountant at a well-known local firm, and his colleagues described him as dependable but somewhat reserved. Bobby Dean was perceived as a dedicated family man, though his quiet demeanor often made him seem distant. During the interrogation, Bobby Dean was initially calm and cooperative. He provided a detailed account of his activities on the night of Leah's murder. He claimed he had been at home, watching a basketball game on ESPN and then going to bed early. However, his calmness began to waver as detectives pressed him on his relationship with Leah. The detectives, Joseph Costella and Ithiel Rivera, noticed signs of strain in Bobby Dean's demeanor when they mentioned Leah's recent discovery of Caleb's secret relationship with his high school English teacher, Laura McMasters. Bobby Dean shifted in his seat, and his responses became more defensive. He admitted that the news had caused tension in the family, but he insisted that he had nothing to do with Leah's death. As the questioning continued, it was revealed that Leah had also discovered something else that could serve as a motive. Leah had found out about Bobby Dean's own affair with Laura McMasters. This revelation had caused a significant rift between Leah and Bobby Dean. Leah's diary entries, which the police found, detailed her heartbreak and anger over her husband's betrayal. Bobby Dean's short temper was another point of interest for the investigators. Friends and family members noted that while he was usually composed, he could become very angry when provoked. Detectives Costella and Rivera questioned Bobby Dean about his temper and whether it had ever led to violence. Bobby Dean denied ever hurting Leah, but the detectives were not convinced. To gather more information, the police interviewed Bobby Dean's co-workers and neighbors. They described him as a man who kept to himself and rarely socialized. Some co-workers mentioned noticing changes in his behavior in the weeks leading up to Leah's murder. He seemed more stressed and distracted at work, often making mistakes in his otherwise flawless accounting records. Despite Bobby Dean's insistence on his innocence, the detectives felt they had enough reason to keep him under close watch. They continued to dig into his background, looking for any additional evidence that could link him to the crime. As the investigation unfolded, Bobby Dean remained a key suspect, his calm exterior masking the potential for deeper, darker motives. The police's thorough interrogation and evidence-gathering process aimed to uncover the truth behind Leah Brewster's tragic death, and Bobby Dean's actions and responses during the investigation only intensified their suspicions. The third suspect in the investigation was Laura McMasters, a 55-year-old high school English teacher at Caleb's High School. Laura was well-liked by her students and colleagues, known for her passion for literature and her dedication to helping students succeed. She often stayed late to assist with assignments and had a reputation for being empathetic and approachable. Laura's involvement with Caleb Brewster came to light during the investigation. The relationship was quite the scandal given their age difference and her position as his teacher. Detectives Joseph Costella and Ithiel Rivera brought Laura in for questioning at the Austin Police Department. Laura arrived looking composed but clearly nervous about the situation. During the interrogation, Laura admitted to the sexual relationship with Caleb. She explained that it had started innocently, with her offering extra help after school, but had quickly developed into something sexual. Laura described her connection with Caleb as, quote, beautiful, stating that she cared deeply for him and wanted to support him through his family struggles. The detectives pressed Laura about her whereabouts on the night of Leah Brewster's murder. Laura claims she was at home grading papers and preparing lesson plans for the upcoming week. She had no alibi, as she lived alone, and there were no witnesses to corroborate her story. This raised suspicions, and the detectives continued to probe. Laura's phone records showed numerous sexually explicit texts and naked pictures exchanged between her and Caleb, especially in the days leading up to Leah's death. The messages revealed their concerns about Leah discovering their relationship and the potential consequences. However, there was no direct evidence linking Laura to the murder. Detective Rivera, using her empathetic approach, asked Laura about her feelings towards Leah. Laura admitted that Leah's discovery of the relationship had caused significant tension. Leah had confronted Laura in her classroom, demanding she end the relationship with Caleb immediately. Laura described the confrontation as heated but insisted she had no intention of harming Leah or of ending the relationship. Despite her calm demeanor, the detectives sensed that Laura was hiding something. They searched her home, looking for any evidence that might connect her to the crime. They found nothing incriminating, but Laura remained a key suspect due to her close involvement with Caleb and the conflict with Leah. Laura's colleagues were shocked by the news. They described her as a dedicated and caring teacher, someone who went above and beyond for her students. The revelation of her sexual relationship with Caleb was hard for them to believe, and the idea that she could be involved in Leah's murder was even more difficult to grasp. As the investigation continued, Laura's life was turned upside down. The scrutiny from the police, the media, and the community weighed heavily on her. She maintained her innocence, cooperating with the authorities while trying to navigate the fallout from the scandal. The detectives kept Laura under close observation, searching for any slip-up or new evidence that could shed light on Leah Brewster's tragic death. On the afternoon of March 16, 2018, a breakthrough in the case came when new evidence was discovered. It was a warm, sunny day in Austin, and the police received a call from a local gardener who had been working in a nearby park, Zilker Metropolitan Park, when he stumbled upon a blood-stained glove hidden behind some bushes near the park's edge. He immediately contacted the Austin Police Department, and officers arrived at the scene within minutes. Detectives Joseph Costella and Ithiel Rivera, who were leading the investigation, rushed to the park. They carefully retrieved the glove, making sure not to contaminate any potential evidence. The glove was sent to the forensic lab for analysis, and the area around the park was thoroughly searched for additional clues. The forensic team worked quickly, and the results came back later that evening. The blood on the glove matched Leah Brewster's, and there were traces of another substance inside the glove that could be DNA from the suspect. This discovery gave the detectives a renewed sense of urgency. They now had a tangible piece of evidence that could potentially link someone to the crime scene. Detective Rivera reviewed surveillance footage from around the park, hoping to spot anyone who might have been acting suspiciously on the day of Leah's murder. The footage revealed a figure wearing a dark hoodie, walking hurriedly away from the park around the time the murder was believed to have occurred. The person's face was not clearly visible, but the footage provided a lead. Further analysis of the glove's DNA revealed it matched Bobby Dean Brewster. The detectives were now more convinced than ever that he was involved in his wife's murder. They decided to bring him in for further questioning, armed with this new piece of evidence. During the second interrogation, Bobby Dean's calm demeanor began to crack. When confronted with the DNA evidence, he became defensive and evasive. He couldn't provide a satisfactory explanation for how his DNA ended up in a blood-stained glove found near the crime scene. The detectives pressed him harder, and his story started to fall apart. Meanwhile, the forensic team continued to search for additional evidence. They discovered a partial fingerprint on the handle of the kitchen knife used in the murder. This fingerprint also matched Bobby Dean's, strengthening the case against him. The discovery of the glove and the matching DNA and fingerprint evidence were pivotal in the investigation. The detectives now had enough to move forward with their case against Bobby Dean. They continued to gather more evidence, preparing to make an arrest and bring justice for Leah Brewster. The new evidence brought a sense of relief to the community, who had been on edge since Leah's tragic death. It also gave Leah's family hope that the person responsible for her murder would finally be held accountable. On March 18, 2018, armed with crucial evidence, the police were ready to make their move. Bobby Dean Brewster, 45, an accountant by profession, had become their primary suspect. Known for his meticulous and organized nature, Bobby Dean's life seemed orderly from the outside, but inside he was battling jealousy and rage. The investigation revealed that Bobby Dean had discovered his son Caleb's secret relationship with Laura McMasters, the English teacher. This revelation angered him, but what infuriated him more was Leah's discovery of his own affair with Laura. Driven by jealousy and rage, Bobby Dean had initially planned to confront Caleb, his love rival. However, when Leah entered the room where he was waiting, his anger redirected toward her. In a moment of uncontrollable rage, he grabbed the kitchen knife and stabbed Leah to death. Detectives Joseph Castella and Ithiel Rivera, who had been leading the investigation, arrived at Bobby Dean's office early that morning. They had an arrest warrant and the evidence needed to take him into custody. Bobby Dean was taken by surprise as the detectives entered his office and informed him of the charges. His calm exterior shattered, and he became visibly agitated. Bobby Dean was handcuffed and escorted out of his office, past shocked colleagues. His arrest made headlines, with local news stations covering the story. The community was stunned, and the news spread quickly through social media. Leah's family had mixed emotions about Bobby Dean's arrest. They were relieved that the person responsible for Leah's death was caught, but they were also devastated that it was someone so close to them. Leah's sister, Samantha, expressed her sorrow and anger in an interview, stating that she felt betrayed by Bobby Dean, whom she had trusted. As Bobby Dean was led away by the police, his reaction was a mix of shock and resignation. He didn't resist the arrest, knowing the weight of the evidence against him. The detectives took him to the Austin Police Department for booking, where he was processed and placed in a holding cell. The evidence, including the blood-stained glove with Bobby Dean's DNA, the surveillance footage, and the partial fingerprint on the knife, were crucial in solving the case. The detectives' relentless pursuit of justice ensured that Leah Brewster's killer was held accountable. The arrest marked a significant step towards justice for Leah's family, providing them with some solace amid their grief. The community rallied around them, offering support and condolences as they began to process the tragic events. The trial of Bobby Dean Brewster began on July 10, 2018, at the Travis County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with reporters from KVUE, the Austin American-Statesman, and other media outlets. The community watched closely as the proceedings unfolded. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Sarah Byneding, a 42-year-old with a reputation for being tough and tenacious. Byneding laid out the case against Bobby Dean with meticulous detail. She presented the blood-stained glove, the partial fingerprint on the knife, and the DNA evidence linking Bobby Dean to the crime. She argued that Bobby Dean's jealousy and rage led him to murder his wife, Leah Brewster, in a fit of uncontrolled anger. On the defense side was attorney Michael Grove Basado, a 50-year-old known for his calm demeanor and persuasive arguments. Grove Basado contended that the evidence was circumstantial and that there was no clear motive for Bobby Dean to kill his wife. He tried to cast doubt on the reliability of the forensic evidence and suggested that someone else could have been responsible for Leah's death. Throughout the trial, Leah's family sat in the front row, their faces a mixture of sadness and determination. Her sister often wiped away tears as she listened to the testimonies and evidence presented. The community's support was palpable, with many residents showing up to the courthouse to stand by Leah's family. Caleb Brewster, now a college freshman, also attended the trial. He had to relive the painful memories of his mother's death and the shocking revelation of his father's affair with his teacher, Laura McMasters.
Laura herself testified, admitting to the relationship with both Bobby Dean and Caleb, but maintaining her innocence regarding the murder. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On July 25, 2018, they returned with a verdict. Bobby Dean Brewster was found guilty of second-degree murder.
The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Bobby Dean showed little emotion, staring straight ahead as his fate was sealed. The sentencing took place on August 1, 2018. The judge sentenced Bobby Dean to just 15 years in prison. The sentence was met with mixed reactions. Leah's family felt some relief that justice had been served, but the pain of losing Leah was still raw. Samantha expressed her hope that Bobby Dean would reflect on his actions and the damage he had caused. The community had a similar response. Some felt the sentence was too lenient, given the brutal nature of the crime. Others believed it was fair, considering Bobby Dean's previously clean record and the complex emotions involved. Bobby Dean's conviction and sentencing marked the end of a painful chapter for Leah's family and the Austin community. The trial had exposed deep wounds and secrets, but it also brought a measure of justice for Leah Brewster's untimely death. The family and community now faced the challenge of healing and moving forward from this tragedy. After the trial, life in Austin slowly returned to normal, but the impact of Leah Brewster's murder lingered. Leah's family, particularly her sister Samantha, faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives. Samantha became a vocal advocate for domestic violence awareness, partnering with local organizations like Safe Austin to educate others and provide support to victims. Caleb Brewster, deeply affected by the loss of his mother and the scandal surrounding his father's actions, struggled to find his footing. He decided to transfer to a college out of state, seeking a fresh start away from the painful memories. Caleb focused on his studies in basketball, finding solace in the sport his mother had always supported him in. Laura McMasters continued her teaching position at Austin High School despite the scandal tarnishing her reputation. She faced harsh judgment from the community. In fact, Laura won an award in 2020 for the success in teaching students during the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite her success as a teacher, the stigma of the affair and her involvement in the case continued to follow her. The Brewster home, once a symbol of the happy family, stood empty for several months before being sold. The new owners, aware of the tragic history, sought to bring new life to the house. They renovated and invited the community to a housewarming, symbolizing a fresh start and the healing power of community support. Bobby Dean Brewster, now serving his sentence, had time to reflect on his actions. The prison system offered counseling and rehabilitation programs, which he participated in, hoping to understand and atone for his crimes. His relationship with Caleb remained strained, but there was hope that time and reflection might lead to reconciliation. The trial and its aftermath had left an indelible mark on everyone involved. Leah Brewster's legacy lived on through the positive changes and awareness her tragic death inspired. The community of Austin learned to come together, supporting one another and working towards a future where such tragedies could be prevented. Louis Torino was 45 years old and worked as a financial advisor. He was very good at his job, known for being meticulous and charming. Louis lived in Providence, Rhode Island, with his wife, Sarah Torino, who was 44 years old. Sarah was an elementary school teacher, loved by her students and fellow teachers for her caring and kind personality. The Torinos were well known in their neighborhood and often hosted social gatherings. Louis and Sarah were a loving couple, and their friends admired how close they were. They had 2 children, including their 18-year-old daughter, Bethel Torino. Bethel was a smart and independent college student studying psychology at a local community college. She was very close to her parents and spent a lot of time with them. The Torinos had recently decided to try something new in their marriage. They wanted to spice up their relationship and decided to explore the swinging lifestyle, which includes wife swapping. This was a big decision for them, and they were both excited and nervous about it. They started to get involved with other couples in the community who were also interested in swinging. Just a few days before their deaths, Louis and Sarah were busy planning their next sex meeting. They were going to meet up with their close friends, Jack and Beth Kama. The Connaughts were also into swinging and had swapped partners several times with the Torinos before. The Torinos were looking forward to the event and were talking about it a lot. Louis and Sarah both had dreams for the future. Louis wanted to retire early and travel the world with Sarah. He often talked about visiting places like Paris, Rome, and Tokyo. Sarah dreamed of writing the children's book one day that would tell kids in a child-appropriate way of the swinging lifestyle. She loved working with kids and wanted to continue teaching for a few more years before focusing on her writing. In the days leading up to their tragic deaths, the Torinos were happy and full of life. They were excited about their new lifestyle and the upcoming gathering with the Connaughts. They spent time together, talking about their dreams and plans for the future. Louis and Sarah were a couple who loved life and each other, but their story took a dark turn that no one could have predicted. On January 9, 2019, at 8:30 a.m., Maria Lopez, the Torino family's housekeeper, arrived at their home in Providence, Rhode Island, to start her usual morning routine. Maria had worked for the Torinos for several years and was very close to the family. She greeted their cat, Marco Stefanovic, at the door as usual and began tidying up the living room. As Maria made her way upstairs to clean the bedrooms, she noticed something unusual. The door to Louis and Sarah's bedroom was slightly ajar, which was not typical. Feeling a bit uneasy, she knocked gently and called out their names. There was no response. Maria pushed the door open and was met with a horrifying sight. Louis and Sarah Torino were lying naked on their bed, brutally stabbed to death. Their faces were mutilated beyond recognition, and the sheets were soaked in blood. Maria gasped in shock and stumbled back, her heart racing. She quickly pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911, her hands trembling. The 911 operator answered, and Maria struggled to find her voice. "Help, please. They is dead. Mucho sangre," she cried. The operator tried to calm her down and asked for the address. Maria gave the address and explained that the victims were her employers, Louis and Sarah Torino. While waiting for the police to arrive, Maria ran downstairs and out of the house, unable to bear the sight of the crime scene. She stood in the driveway, shaking and crying. Neighbors, seeing her distress, came over to ask what was wrong, and she told them about the horrible discovery. At 8:45 a.m., the first police officers arrived at the Torino residence. They quickly secured the scene and began their investigation. They spoke with Maria, who was still visibly shaken. She described finding the bodies and her immediate reaction. They gently reassured her and thanked her for her help. The police then escorted Maria to a neighbor's house to rest and recover from the shock. The news of the murder spread quickly. Local media outlets, including the Providence Journal and TV stations like WBRI and NBC 10, covered the story extensively. People in the community were horrified, saddened, and mystified by the tragic deaths of Louis and Sarah Torino. On January 9, 2019, at 8:45 a.m., the Providence police arrived at the Torino residence. The first responders quickly secured the area and called in the detectives. Detective Mark Simmons and his partner, Detective Lisa Chen, were on the scene within minutes. They were known for their dedication and thorough approach to solving crimes. The detectives entered the house and were immediately struck by the gruesome scene in the bedroom. Louis and Sarah Torino lay naked on the bed, their bodies brutally stabbed and their faces mutilated beyond recognition. Blood was everywhere, on the bed, the walls, and the floor. It was clear that this was a crime of extreme passion and rage. Detective Simmons, a tall man with a calm demeanor, took charge of the investigation. He ordered the forensic team to start collecting evidence. Detective Chen, known for her keen eye for detail, began photographing the crime scene from every angle. The room was chaotic, with signs of a violent struggle. The detectives carefully examined the area around the bed. They found the murder weapon, a bloody kitchen knife, on the floor near Louis' side of the bed. They bagged it as evidence, hoping it would provide crucial clues. The team also collected fingerprints from various surfaces and swabbed for DNA samples. Outside, the media had gathered, with reporters from the Providence Journal and local TV stations like WPRI and NBC 10 covering the story. The detectives knew they had to work quickly to provide answers to a shocked and grieving community. Neighbors were questioned about anything they might have seen or heard. Most of them described the Torinos as a friendly and happy couple who often hosted gatherings. No one could believe something so terrible had happened to them. The forensic team used advanced tools to gather evidence. They used luminol to detect traces of blood that might not be visible to the naked eye. They also scanned for any hair or fibers that could link a suspect to the crime scene. Detective Simmons and Detective Chin interviewed Maria Lopez, the housekeeper who had discovered the bodies. Maria, still in shock, recounted her morning routine and her horror upon finding the Torinos. She provided as much detail as she could, despite her distress. The police worked tirelessly throughout the day and night, piecing together the events that led to the murders. They knew this case would require all their skills and resources to solve. The detectives remained focused, determined to bring justice to Louis and Sarah Torino. The first suspect the police investigated was Jack Conant, a 47-year-old bar owner. Jack was known in Providence for running a popular local bar called Jack's Place, which was frequented by many in the community. He was married to Beth Conant, and the couple was known to participate as self-described experts in the swinging lifestyle. Jack's friends described him as quiet and reserved, often keeping to himself. Despite his calm exterior, he was known to be somewhat introverted and prone to jealousy. Jack and Beth had agreed to swap partners with the Torinos, making Jack a key person of interest in the investigation. On the night of the murders, Jack had been at his bar. The police interviewed him there on January 10, 2019, the day after the bodies were found. Jack's demeanor during the interrogation was calm, but there was a noticeable tension in his voice. Detective Simmons and Detective Chen questioned Jack about his relationship with the Torinos and his whereabouts on the night of January 8, 2019. Jack explained that he had been at his bar all night, a statement that his employees later corroborated. Surveillance footage from Jack's place confirmed his presence there until closing time, around 2:00 a.m. Despite his alibi, the detectives pressed Jack about his feelings towards the Torinos. They wanted to know if there had been any recent conflicts or tensions, especially given the intimate nature of their relationships. Jack admitted that he sometimes felt jealous of all the sex Beth was having with other people, but he denied any ill will towards Louis and Sarah. The detectives also asked Jack if he had noticed any unusual behavior from Beth or if she had mentioned any plans to meet with the Torinos. Jack insisted that he had no idea anything was wrong and that Beth had not mentioned anything out of the ordinary. Throughout the interrogation, Jack remained composed but visibly anxious. He repeatedly asserted his innocence and expressed shock and sadness over the Torinos' deaths. The detectives noted his reactions in body language, looking for any signs of deceit. While Jack's alibi seemed solid, the police continued to scrutinize his actions and statements. They knew that in cases like this, even the smallest detail could be crucial. As the investigation progressed, the detectives remained cautious, keeping all possibilities open while they gathered more evidence and interviewed other suspects. The second suspect in the investigation was Beth Conant, a 40-year-old professor of shamanism at the Rhode Island School of Design. Beth was known for her outgoing and persuasive nature. She was the more dominant partner in our marriage to Jack and was very interested in the swinging lifestyle, including swapping partners with both men and women. Beth was often the life of the party, charismatic and charming, but she also had a powerful and controlling nature which had caused tension in our marriage. The police brought Beth in for questioning on January 11, 2019, 2 days after the discovery of the bodies. Detective Simmons and Detective Chin led the interrogation, asking Beth about her relationship with the Torinos and her activities on the night of the murders. Beth admitted that she and Jack had an open relationship and had swapped partners with the Torinos several times. Beth's alibi for the night of January 8, 2019 was that she was home alone, reading and grading papers. She seemed confident but defensive during the questioning. The detectives pressed her on her feelings towards the Torinos, especially considering her attraction to their 18-year-old daughter, Bethel, something Jack had told him about. Beth did not deny her attraction, admitting she found Bethel very attractive, saying she had the hottest body on the face of the earth, but insisted she would never harm Louis and Sarah. Beth's demeanor during the interrogation was cooperative yet guarded. She explained that her relationship with the Torinos was consensual and that there were no recent conflicts or issues. Despite her confident front, the detectives noticed moments of nervousness, particularly when discussing her attraction to Bethel. The detectives also asked about any tensions or problems in her marriage with Jack. Beth acknowledged that her lifestyle of unlimited sexual freedom sometimes made her husband jealousy, but she downplayed it, saying they had always worked through their issues through shamanistic rituals she had learned. She firmly denied any involvement in the murders, expressing shock and sadness at the loss of her friends. Throughout the interrogation, Beth maintained her innocence, but the detectives remained skeptical. Her alibi was weak, with no witnesses to confirm her whereabouts on the night of the murders. The police continued to gather evidence and scrutinize her statements, knowing that her strong personality and complex relationships could be key to understanding the motive behind the crime. As the investigation progressed, Beth's role in the case remained a critical focus. The detectives knew they needed more evidence to determine her involvement and continued to delve into her past and her interactions with the Torinos, hoping to uncover the truth. The third suspect in the investigation was Bethel Torino. The 18-year-old daughter of Louis and Sarah Torino. Bethel was a college student majoring in psychology at a local community college. She was known to be intelligent and independent, and she had always been very close to her parents. However, she had become increasingly disturbed by their growing interest in the swinging lifestyle. The police brought Bethel in for questioning on January 12, 2019. Detective Simmons and Detective Chin led the interrogation, asking Bethel about her relationship with her parents and her feelings about their new lifestyle. Bethel explained that she had initially tried to be supportive, but she had become horrified when her parents expressed interest in involving her to please Beth Conant, who was sexually attracted to her. Bethel's demeanor during the questioning was a mix of anger and sadness. She spoke about feeling betrayed and dehumanized by her parents' intentions, even showing the police a spreadsheet her father had made to show her ways to sexually satisfy Beth during their planned encounter. She admitted to having arguments with them about their lifestyle, but she firmly denied any involvement in their deaths. The detectives noted her emotional responses, seeing the young woman who was deeply hurt by her parents' actions. The detectives also questioned Bethel about her whereabouts on the night of January 8, 2019. Bethel stated that she had been studying at the local library until it closed at 10:00 p.m., after which she went home and went to bed. Her alibi was partially confirmed by library staff, who remembered seeing her there, but there were no witnesses to verify her activities after she left. As the interrogation continued, the detectives probed Bethel's relationships with the Conants. Bethel expressed strong dislike for Beth Conant, describing her as manipulative and overbearing. She recounted a recent incident where Beth had walked in on her in the bathroom and started taking off her clothes, asking her, "Am I beautiful enough for you?" Something which Bethel felt very uncomfortable and angry. Bethel's emotions ran high during the questioning, but she consistently maintained her innocence. She spoke about her dreams of becoming a psychologist and helping others, a stark contrast to the violent crime she was being questioned about. Despite her strong denials, the detectives remained cautious, knowing that strong emotions and family tensions could be a powerful motive. The investigation into Bethel continued, with the detectives carefully analyzing her statements and looking for any inconsistencies. They knew that understanding her true feelings and actions was crucial to solving the case. Bethel's role in the tragic events of January 8 remained uncertain, but the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. On January 20, 2019, at 9:00 a.m., Detective Lisa Chen received a call that new evidence had been found. It was a cold, snowy morning in Providence, and the detectives were eager for a break in the case. The call came from a jogger who had been running through a nearby park when he stumbled upon something unusual. Under a bush, partially covered by snow, he found a blood-stained jacket. Detectives Simmons and Chen quickly arrived at the scene. The jacket was carefully bagged and sent to the forensics lab for analysis. The detectives spoke with the jogger, who explained how he found the jacket. He seemed calm, but a bit shaken by his discovery. The detectives thanked him for his help and assured him they would follow up on this new lead. At the forensics lab, technicians worked swiftly to examine the jacket. They found traces of blood that matched the DNA of Louis and Sarah Torino. This was a significant breakthrough. Inside one of the jacket pockets, they discovered a crumpled piece of paper. It was a receipt from a local gas station, dated January 8, 2019, at 11:30 p.m., just a few hours before the murders. Detective Chen reviewed surveillance footage from the gas station. The video showed Bethel Torino purchasing gas and snacks. This placed her out and about late on the night of the murders, casting doubt on her alibi. The detectives knew they needed to speak with Bethel again. Bethel was brought in for another round of questioning. When confronted with the evidence, her demeanor changed. She became more defensive and agitated. Bethel insisted that she had gone for a drive to clear her head and had nothing to do with the murders. However, the detectives pressed her on the details, and she struggled to maintain her story. The new evidence also led the detectives to re-examine the crime scene. They found a set of footprints in the backyard that matched the soles of Bethel's boots. This further connected her to the scene on the night of the murders. Detective Simmons and Chen knew they were getting closer to the truth. As the investigation continued, the police remained focused on the evidence. They knew that every detail mattered. The jacket, the receipt, and the footprints were all pieces of a puzzle that they were determined to solve. The detectives worked tirelessly, knowing that justice for Louis and Sarah Torino depended on their efforts. On January 22, 2019, at 10:00 a.m., the police were confident they had found the murderer. After gathering crucial evidence, including the blood-stained jacket and surveillance footage, detectives believe Bethel Torino, the 18-year-old daughter of Louis and Sarah Torino, was responsible for their deaths. Bethel was an intelligent and independent young woman, studying psychology at a local community college. She had always been close to her parents, but had grown increasingly disturbed by their new interest in the swinging lifestyle. The breaking point came when she discovered their plans to please Beth Connor, who desperately wanted to have sex with her. Her father even gave her a spreadsheet showing all the methods she could use to sexually please Beth. Bethel felt disgusted, betrayed, and dehumanized, which led to a heated confrontation on the night of January 8, 2019. On that night, in a fit of rage and desperation, Bethel used a kitchen knife to brutally stab her parents while they slept naked in their bed. The scene in the bedroom showed the intensity of her anger, with their faces mutilated beyond recognition. It was a crime driven by a twisted sense of self-protection and rage. The detectives pieced together the events leading to the murders. Bethel's receipt from the gas station placed her out late at night, contradicting her alibi. Footprints matching her boots were found in the backyard, further linking her to the crime scene. Confronted with this evidence, Bethel's defensive demeanor during the second interrogation raised more suspicions. On January 23, 2019, at 8:00 a.m., the police arrived at Bethel's home to arrest her. Detective Simmons and Detective Chin led the operation. Bethel was surprised and initially resisted, but eventually she was taken into custody. The police read her rights, and she was charged with the murders of her parents. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. The Torinos were well-liked, and the idea that their daughter was the murderer was hard for many to accept. Friends and neighbors were devastated, struggling to understand how such a tragedy could happen. The victim's family reacted with a mix of sorrow and disbelief. They had lost not only Louis and Sarah, but now faced the reality that Bethel, a beloved family member, was responsible. The arrest provided some answers, but also opened up more questions about what could have driven her to commit such a heinous act. The trial of Bethel Torino began on October 15, 2019, in the Providence Superior Court. The courtroom was packed with media, friends, and family of the victims. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Rachel Moore, a seasoned prosecutor known for her tough demeanor and relentless pursuit of justice. Moore argued that Bethel's actions were premeditated and driven by a deep sense of betrayal and rage. Moore presented the evidence: the blood-stained jacket, the gas station receipt, and the matching footprints. She called witnesses, including the jogger who found the jacket and the forensic experts who linked the evidence to Bethel. Moore painted a picture of a young woman pushed to the edge by her parents' actions and driven to commit a brutal double murder. The defense attorney, James G. Poker, was a well-respected lawyer known for his calm and composed manner. Poker argued that Bethel was a victim of her circumstances, overwhelmed by her parents' lifestyle and their plans to involve her. He claimed that Bethel acted in a moment of temporary insanity, unable to control her actions due to extreme emotional distress. During the trial, Bethel's demeanor was somber and tearful. She showed remorse and expressed her love for her parents, saying she never meant to harm them. Her emotional testimony moved some in the courtroom, including her remaining family members, who were visibly torn between their love for Bethel and their grief for Louis and Sarah. The victim's family watched the trial with heavy hearts. They struggled with the conflicting emotions of losing loved ones and seeing another loved one on trial for the crime. The community also followed the trial closely, with many people discussing the case in local coffee shops and on social media. On November 5, 2019, the jury reached a verdict. Bethel Torino was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge, known for his fairness, sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The sentencing brought a mix of reactions. Some felt that justice had been served, while others believed the sentence was too harsh, considering Bethel's emotional state at the time of the crime. The verdict and sentencing had a profound effect on everyone involved. The victim's family continued to mourn their loss while grappling with the reality of Bethel's punishment. Friends and neighbors tried to find closure in the wake of such a tragic and complicated case. After the trial, life in Providence changed for everyone involved in the Torino case. The community was still reeling from the tragic events and the shocking trial. Bethel Torino, now serving her life sentence at the Rhode Island Department of Corrections, faced a challenging reality. She was housed in the maximum security unit, where she would spend at least 25 years before being eligible for parole. In prison, Bethel struggled with the weight of her actions and the isolation from her former life.
She attended counseling sessions and participated in educational programs to pass the time. Her case continued to be a topic of discussion among prison reform advocates and legal analysts. Jack Cunha, Beth's husband, tried to rebuild his life after the trial. He closed Jack's place, the bar he had owned for years, as it had become a painful reminder of the past. Jack moved away from Providence and divorced Beth, deciding to start over in a different city, seeking to escape the memories of the tragedy and focus on his own healing. Beth Cunha continued her life in Rhode Island, but her reputation was forever changed by the events. She remained in the public eye due to her connection to the case, but she distanced herself from the media and the community, trying to move forward while grappling with the impact of the murders. She also took up her dear friend and sexual partner's project of making a kid's book, eventually self-publishing the finished book. Manny the monkey swings from tree to tree to muted reception in 2023. Overall, the case of the Torino family left a deep scar on Providence. The tragedy and the subsequent trial were reminders of how complex and painful human relationships can be, and how even the closest family bonds can unravel in the face of intense emotions and misunderstandings. This tragic story serves as a stark reminder of how complex human relationships can lead to unforeseen and devastating consequences. Yet Robertson was just 18 years old when his life was tragically cut short. A senior at Bridgerton High School in Bridgerton, Missouri, a quiet suburb of St. Louis, Jet was known for his love of bicycles and spent much of his free time working on them in the garage or riding around town. He was the kind of kid who was always ready to lend a helping hand, whether it was fixing a neighbor's flat tire or volunteering at local events like the Bridgerton Fall Festival. Jet was also known for his easygoing personality. He was the friend who could always be counted on to keep a secret or to share a laugh during tough times. Jet's life had taken a difficult turn earlier that year when his father died suddenly of a heart attack. The loss hit him hard, leaving a void that no one could quite fill. His step-grandmother, Nancy Robertson McClear, became his main source of comfort during this period. Nancy had been a constant presence in Jet's life, partially raising him after his mother, Brielle Cantora, left the family when he was just 14 years old. With his mother gone and his father now deceased, Jet turned to Nancy for emotional support. She was always there with a listening ear and a warm hug, making Jet feel like he wasn't alone. Jet had dreams of leaving Bridgerton after graduation. He often talked about moving to the relatively glamorous Kansas City, where he hoped to find work as a bicycle mechanic and eventually open his own shop. His friends and teachers described him as hardworking and full of potential. He was even saving up for a trip to Chicago, something he'd wanted to do since he was a child. In the days before his death, Jet was focused on his future, excited about the prospect of leaving his small-town life behind. He was also preparing for Halloween, planning to dress up as Nancy from Stranger Things, one of his favorite TV shows. However, beneath the surface, there was a dark secret that no one could have predicted, a secret that would soon lead to his tragic and untimely death. On the morning of October 28, 2020, Bridgerton was waking up to a crisp fall day, with pumpkins on doorsteps and political signs lining the streets as the contentious 2020 election neared. At around 8:00 a.m., Kevin Robertson, Jet's stepfather, made a shocking discovery. Kevin had been planning to head out early for his construction job, but noticed that Jet's usual morning routine seemed off. Jet hadn't come inside for breakfast, which was unusual since he was always up early, often tinkering in the garage before school. When Kevin went to check on him, he found the garage door slightly ajar. Inside, Kevin was met with a horrific sight. Jet's lifeless body lay crumpled on the cold concrete floor. The teenager's head was bloodied, and beside him was the wrench that had once been a trusted tool in Jet's hands but was now stained with blood. Kevin's heart pounded as he stood frozen, trying to process the scene in front of him. The shock quickly turned to panic. Kevin rushed inside the house and grabbed his phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. His voice was frantic as he told the operator about the terrible scene in the garage. Kevin's reaction was one of sheer terror. He had never expected to find his stepson like this. He paced back and forth in the driveway, looking up and down the street as if hoping to wake up from a bad dream. Within minutes, the Bridgerton Police Department arrived at the scene. Officers quickly secured the area, taking off the garage and driveway as neighbors began to gather, curious and concerned. The news of Jet's death spread quickly through the tight-knit community. Many residents were glued to their TVs, watching politically charged coverage of the upcoming election, when they got word of the tragic event unfolding just down the street.
As paramedics arrived and confirmed Jet's death, Kevin was left in a state of disbelief, sitting on the curb with his head in his hands. He kept repeating, "Why would someone do this?" as officers tried to calm him down. The small suburban town of Bridgerton, known for sharing a name with the popular Netflix series loved by sexually frustrated women everywhere, was suddenly thrust into a nightmare that would soon reveal more darkness than anyone could have imagined. The Bridgerton Police Department responded quickly to the call, arriving at the Robertson home around 8:15 a.m. on October 28, 2020. Officer James Delgado, a 12-year veteran of the force, led the team. Known for his calm demeanor and sharp investigative skills, Delgado had seen his share of crime scenes, but nothing quite like this in the peaceful town of Bridgerton. The garage where Jet's body was found was a small, cluttered space filled with the typical tools and gadgets of an 18-year-old who loved working on bicycles. The scene was eerily quiet, except for the occasional hum of a distant lawnmower or the chirping of birds. The concrete floor, usually dusty and scattered with bike parts, was now marred by a pool of dark, dried blood. The wrench, a heavy tool from Jet's own toolbox, lay beside him, its weight and size making it clear that it was the weapon used to bludgeon him to death. As Officer Delgado and his team began their investigation, they methodically documented the scene. Photographs were taken from every angle, capturing the blood splatter on the floor and walls, the position of Jet's body, and the wrench that delivered the fatal blows. The police carefully bagged the wrench as evidence, noting the bloodstains and any potential fingerprints. They also collected samples from the blood pool and any other traces that might help identify the killer. The crime scene itself was a disturbing contrast, both clean and brutal. There was no sign of a struggle, suggesting that Jet had been caught off guard. The orderly state of the garage made the violent act even more shocking. The team's focus was on finding any clues that might point to the perpetrator, footprints, fibers, anything out of place. As the investigation continued, Delgado couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a random act of violence. The use of Jet's own tool as the murder weapon suggested a level of familiarity between the victim and the killer. The fact that there were no signs of forced entry or robbery led the police to believe that Jet's killer was someone he knew well, someone who had been in the garage with him before everything went wrong. By the end of the day, the crime scene was thoroughly calmed over, but the mystery was only beginning to unravel. The next step would be to question those closest to Jet, as the police started to piece together the events that led to this gruesome murder. The first person the police turned their attention to was Nancy Robertson McClear, Jet's 74-year-old step-grandmother. Nancy was well known in Bridgerton as a retired school teacher who had spent decades educating the town's children. With her silver hair and gentle smile, she was the picture of a sweet, nurturing grandmother. However, the police couldn't ignore the whispers of her unusually close relationship with Jet, a relationship that had raised more than a few eyebrows among those who knew the family. Nancy had partially raised Jet after his father's sudden death, and the two had grown close in the years since. But close didn't begin to describe the reality of their bond. The police soon learned that Nancy and Jet had been involved in a secret sexual relationship, a fact that shocked even the most seasoned investigators. This discovery cast Nancy in a whole new light and made her a prime suspect in the murder. When questioned by the police, Nancy was initially cooperative. She appeared calm, sitting in her cozy living room surrounded by family photos and the faint scent of vanilla candles. She spoke fondly of Jet, describing him as a loving grandson who had been a source of comfort for her after her husband's death. But as the questions grew more pointed, Nancy's demeanor began to shift. She became more defensive, her answers shorter and less detailed. When asked about her whereabouts on the morning of October 28, Nancy claimed she had been at home, preparing for a quiet day of reading and knitting. Despite her calm exterior, the police noticed that Nancy's hands were trembling slightly, and her eyes darted nervously around the room. They pressed her on the nature of her relationship with Jet, and while she denied anything inappropriate, the investigators weren't convinced. The wrench used to kill Jet was from his own toolbox, a detail that suggested the killer had access to his belongings, someone who knew him well enough to be in his private space without raising suspicion. Nancy's possible motive became clearer as the investigation progressed. It appeared that Jet had recently tried to end their sexual relationship, possibly out of guilt or fear of being discovered. This rejection may have driven Nancy to commit the unthinkable. The idea of losing Jet, her sexual outlet, combined with the possibility of their frankly disgusting secret being exposed, could have pushed her over the edge.
As the police wrapped up their initial questioning, Nancy remained a person of interest. Her calm demeanor, while initially convincing, now seemed more like a mask hiding deeper emotions. Emotions that might have led her to murder the very person she claimed to love. Kevin Robertson, Jet's 46-year-old stepfather, was the second suspect the police looked into. Kevin was a construction foreman, known around Bridgerton for his tough, no-nonsense attitude. He had a gruff exterior, often seen wearing a worn-out Carhartt jacket and steel-toed boots. Kevin was a man of few words, preferring to let his work do the talking. He had spent years in the construction business, building homes and managing crews, but his relationship with Chet, it had always been rocky. The tension between Kevin and Jet wasn't a secret. People in town had noticed the strained dynamic between them, especially after the death of Jet's father. Kevin had stepped in as a father figure, but Jet never fully accepted him. They clashed frequently, and their arguments often spilled out into the open, with Kevin's booming voice easily carrying through the thin walls of their modest suburban home. When the police questioned Kevin, he was surprisingly calm. Sitting at the kitchen table, his large hands resting on the worn wood surface, Kevin didn't hesitate to answer their questions. He acknowledged the rocky relationship with Chet, but denied any involvement in his stepson's death. Kevin explained that he had been working on a construction site across town on the morning of October 28, leading a crew on a project to build a new wing at the local high school. He even provided the names of his co-workers, offering them as alibis to support his claim. However, as the questioning continued, a shockingly different side of Kevin began to emerge. The police uncovered a surprising secret. Kevin led a secret double life as a drag queen and Adele impersonator, performing under the stage name Adele Dazeem. This revelation shocked the small conservative town of Bridgerton, where such a lifestyle was far from the norm and widely considered to be, quote, evil. Kevin's hidden identity raised questions about how much of his life he had kept from his family, including Jet. Despite this surprising twist, the police couldn't find any direct evidence linking Kevin to the murder. His co-workers confirmed his alibi, and there were no signs that Kevin had been involved in the crime. However, the discovery of his secret life added a new layer of complexity to the case, leading investigators to wonder if there was more to Kevin's story than met the eye. Kevin's motive for possibly wanting Jet out of the picture was still unclear, but his history of violent outbursts and the strained relationship with Jet kept him in the police's sights. As they continued their investigation, Kevin remained under suspicion, with detectives closely monitoring his every move. Brielle Cantora, Jet's 38-year-old estranged mother, was the third suspect police investigated. Brielle had a troubled past that was well known around Bridgerton. A former stripper who'd struggled with alcoholism and drug addiction, she had been in and out of rehab facilities for most of Jet's childhood. Her life had been a roller coaster, marked by mental illness and several arrests. Brielle's reputation in the town was anything but stable, and many people had written her off as a lost cause. After abandoning Jet when he was a teenager, Brielle had recently tried to reconnect with him. In October 2020, she had returned to Springfield, a nearby city, and was living in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Jet, still harboring resentment toward her for leaving him, was reluctant to let her back into his life. Their relationship remained strained, with only sporadic contact between them. Brielle, however, was determined to make amends and had been reaching out to him more frequently in the days leading up to his death. When the police brought Brielle in for questioning, she appeared nervous and anxious. Dressed in a worn-out hoodie and jeans, she sat fidgeting in the interrogation room, her eyes darting around as she answered the detective's questions. Brielle denied any involvement in Jet's murder, insisting that she had only wanted to reconnect with her son and had no reason to harm him. She claimed that on the morning of October 28, she was at a local AA meeting, trying to stay on the path of sobriety. The meeting, held at a church basement in Springfield, some 200 miles away, was a regular part of her routine. Despite her alibi, detectives couldn't shake the feeling that Brielle was hiding something. Her past behavior and unstable mental state made her a person of interest in the case. The police pressed her on her whereabouts and her interactions with Chet in the days leading up to his death, but Brielle stuck to her story. She maintained that she had nothing to do with the murder and that she was only trying to be a better mother to her son. However, the police were skeptical. Brielle's history of erratic behavior, coupled with the recent attempts to reconnect with Jet, raised questions about her true motives. Was she trying to make up for lost time, or was there something more sinister at play? The detectives continued to dig into her past, searching for any clues that might link her to the crime. In the end, while Brielle's troubled history and strained relationship with Jet made her a prime suspect, there was no concrete evidence to tie her directly to the murder. The investigation into her involvement remained open as the police looked for any overlooked details that could provide the answers they needed. On November 1, 2020, just days before Halloween and the heated presidential election, Bridgerton, Missouri, was experiencing a cold front with cloudy skies and a brisk wind that had residents bundling up in their favorite hoodies and jackets. It was on this chilly afternoon that a crucial piece of new evidence was discovered, bringing a significant twist to the investigation into Jet Robertson's murder. Detective Mark Travis, who had been leading the investigation, decided to revisit Jet's garage one more time, believing that something had been overlooked. As he searched through the cluttered space, he noticed an old wooden toolbox that had been pushed into a corner. Inside the toolbox, buried beneath a pile of rusty tools, Travis found a small leather-bound notebook. The notebook, worn from years of use, was filled with Jet's neat handwriting, detailing various thoughts and observations. As Detective Travis flipped through the pages, he stumbled upon something that immediately caught his attention. Tucked between notes about bike repairs and homework assignments was a series of entries that revealed Jet's growing suspicions about Nancy Robertson McClear, his step-grandmother and secret lover. The entries described how Jet had discovered troubling details about the mysterious death of Nancy's third husband, Charles McClear, who had died under strange circumstances back in 1995. Jet had uncovered that Charles' death, initially ruled as an accident, had always bothered him. He found old newspaper clippings and records that hinted at foul play, including an insurance policy that Nancy had cashed out shortly after Charles' death. The notebook entries indicated that Jet had confronted Nancy about his suspicions and had even threatened to expose their secret sexual relationship with him if she didn't end their secret relationship and let him move on with his life. The discovery of the notebook was a game changer. The police now had a motive for why Nancy might have wanted Jet silenced. She couldn't risk him revealing her involvement in Charles' death, which had been quietly buried for years. Detective Travis immediately recognized the importance of this evidence and ordered a thorough review of Charles McClear's death, suspecting that Nancy might have had a pattern of eliminating those who posed a threat to her. The notebook also explained Nancy's increasingly erratic behavior in the days leading up to Jet's murder. It painted a picture of a woman who was desperate to protect her secrets at any cost. With this new evidence in hand, the police were more convinced than ever that Nancy Robertson McClear was not only involved in Jet's death, but that it was a cold, calculated act to keep him from exposing her past. As the investigation moved forward, the police prepared to confront Nancy with this damning new evidence, bringing them one step closer to solving the mystery of Jet's tragic death. On the morning of November 3, 2020, the day of the contentious presidential election, Bridgerton, Missouri was buzzing with election talk. But the local police were focused on a different task. With the new evidence from Jet Robertson's notebook in hand, Detective Mark Travis and his team felt confident they had found the murderer. The notebook entries, which revealed Jet's suspicions about Nancy Robertson McClear's involvement in the suspicious death of her third husband, Charles McClear, in 1995, provided a strong motive for Nancy to silence Jet permanently. The police carefully reviewed the evidence, piecing together the sequence of events. They believed that Nancy, consumed by her obsessive love for Jet and terrified of her dark past being exposed, had lured Jet into the garage on the night of his murder. There, in a fit of desperation and fear, she grabbed a heavy wrench from his toolbox, the very tool Jet used daily for his shop class, and bludgeoned him to death. The brutal act ensured that Jet could never reveal her twin secrets. With this theory in mind, Detective Travis obtained an arrest warrant for Nancy Robertson McClear. While most of the town was preparing for a tense election day, the police made their move. They arrived at Nancy's quaint, well-kept home in Bridgerton, where she had been living alone since Charles' death. The officers knocked on the door, and Nancy, appearing calm and composed, answered. As the police read her the charges, Nancy's demeanor quickly changed. Shock and panic washed over her face as she realized the evidence against her was overwhelming. She protested her innocence, insisting that she loved Jet and could never harm him. But the detectives remained firm, knowing they had enough to bring her to justice. Nancy was handcuffed and led out of her home, a scene witnessed by a few neighbors who had gathered on the street, curious about the police presence. The news of her arrest spread quickly through Bridgerton, shocking the tight-knit community. Many found it hard to believe that the sweet elderly woman they had known for years could be capable of such a horrific crime. As Nancy was taken into custody, Jet's family, who had been grappling with the loss of their loved one, finally felt a sense of relief. Although the arrest didn't bring Jet back, it gave them hope that justice would be served. The police had successfully unraveled the twisted relationship and dark secrets that led to Jet Robertson's tragic death, and now the focus shifted to bringing Nancy to trial for her crimes. Nancy Robertson McClear's trial began in December 2020, just weeks after the heated presidential election. The case had captured the attention of Bridgerton, Missouri, with local newspapers like the Bridgerton Gazette covering every detail. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Michelle Harmon, 42, a determined and sharp-minded lawyer known for her tenacity, presented a strong case against Nancy. They highlighted the evidence found in Jet's notebook, which revealed Nancy's involvement in the suspicious death of her third husband, Charles McClear. This, they argued, was the motive for her killing Jet. He had threatened to expose her dark secret. During the trial, the prosecution laid out the events leading to Jet's death. They described how Nancy, consumed by fear and obsession, lured Jet to the garage and bludgeoned him to death with a wrench from his own toolbox. The wrench was not only a tool Jet used daily for his shock class, but also a symbol of Nancy's desperate attempt to silence him forever. The prosecution's argument was clear. Nancy had committed a premeditated murder to protect her secret. The defense, led by Robert Timmons, 54, a seasoned attorney with a reputation for defending tough cases, painted a different picture. They argued that Nancy was a frail, elderly woman who couldn't possibly commit such a violent act. They suggested that the real killer was still out there and that Nancy was being unfairly targeted because of her close relationship with Jet. Timmons tried to cast doubt on the notebook entries, suggesting they were merely the thoughts of a troubled teenager. The trial was emotionally charged, with Jet's family members, including his mother Betrayal, attending every session. They listened in tears as the details of Jet's final moments were recounted, and their grief was palpable in the courtroom. The jury, however, was not swayed by the defense's arguments. After several days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict of guilty. Nancy Robertson McClear was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was met with mixed emotions: relief from Jet's family, who felt justice had been served, and shock from some community members who had once respected Nancy as a beloved teacher and neighbor. The trial's outcome was a stark reminder of the dark secrets that can lurk beneath the surface, even in the most seemingly innocent of lies. After Nancy Robertson McClear's conviction, life in Bridgerton, Missouri, slowly began to return to normal, though the memory of the grisly murder lingered. The town, already stressed by the ongoing pandemic and the contentious 2020 election, was shaken by the revelations during the trial. Many residents, who had once respected Nancy as a beloved teacher, struggled to reconcile the image of the sweet elderly woman with the cold-blooded killer she had become. Jet Robertson's family tried to move forward, but the loss of their son and the horrifying circumstances of his death left deep scars. His mother, Betrayal, found herself struggling with guilt and grief. She had only recently re-entered Jet's life, hoping to rebuild their strained relationship. Instead, she was left to mourn a future that would never come. Betrayal returned to Springfield, where she continued her work as a nurse, but the emotional toll of the tragedy weighed heavily on her. She sought solace in therapy and support groups, where she could share her pain with others who had experienced similar losses. Kevin Robertson, Jet's stepfather, also had to come to terms with the truth about his mother. He had long suspected something was off about Nancy's relationship with Jet, but he never imagined it would lead to murder. After the trial, Kevin stepped away from his work as a construction foreman to focus on his family. He spent more time with his children, hoping to heal the wounds left by the tragedy. Kevin also decided to leave Bridgerton, seeking a fresh start in a new town where the past wouldn't paw him bailey. For the residents of Bridgerton, the murder of Jet Robertson became a cautionary tale, a story that parents shared with their children as a warning about the dangers that can lurk even in the small town. The case would be remembered as a dark chapter in the town's history, a stark reminder that even the most trusted individuals can harbor deadly secrets. Eleanor Jardiance, a seemingly kind-hearted and gentle woman at the age of 77, was known for her nurturing nature and love for her family. Having retired as a children's librarian, she found solace in her passions for gardening and reading classic novels.
cherishing the simple pleasures life had to offer. Despite her advancing age, Eleanor remained an active presence in her family, dedicating her time to supervising the lives of her stepchildren, Cynthia and Ben. Cynthia, the daughter of Eleanor's first husband, and Ben, the son of her late second husband, the renowned lawn care tycoon Bobby Jardiance Jr., were the center of Eleanor's world. She seemingly ensured their well-being and happiness, shaping their lives with her wisdom, care, and sizable financial resources from her late husbands. August of 2009 was a time of tranquility for Tybee Island, a picturesque coastal town where Eleanor resided. The warm summer sun kissed the sandy beaches, inviting locals and tourists alike to indulge in the serene beauty of the Atlantic Ocean. The community thrived on its close-knit nature, with neighbors sharing stories on their porches and attending lively town gatherings. As the sun set on the island, Eleanor could often be found tending to her vibrant garden, a riot of colors and fragrances that served as a testament to her green thumb. Her love for literature spilled over into her surroundings, with quaint bookshelves adorning her cozy cottage, filled with timeless classics and well-worn paperbacks, particularly those of Joyce Lehman, her favorite novelist. In the wake of Eleanor's tragic murder, the tight-knit community would be left in shock and disbelief. The peaceful aura that had once protected Tybee Island was shattered, replaced by an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. As the investigation unfolds, we will delve deeper into the lives of Eleanor Jardiance and those around her, peeling back the layers of secrets and deceit that led to her untimely demise. Stay tuned. We will uncover more shocking revelations and shed light on the dark underbelly of this seemingly peaceful family. On the morning of August 11, 2009, the tranquil shores of Tybee Island, Georgia were shattered by a chilling discovery. Eleanor Jardiance, a beloved member of the secluded seaside community, met a tragic end as her dead body was found sprawled on the sandy beach. The shockwaves of this heinous crime reverberated through the tight-knit community, leaving its residents in a state of disbelief. The grim discovery was made by Patty O'Hurley, a local retiree who had made it a habit to take her leisurely morning walks along the shoreline. As Patty strolled along the beach, enjoying the gentle breeze and the sound of crashing waves, she stumbled upon a sight that would haunt her forever. There, lying in the sand, was the naked body of Eleanor Jardiance. Patty's heart raced as she took in the gruesome scene before her. She immediately reached for her cell phone, trembling with shock, and dialed 911. The authorities were dispatched to the scene without delay, their sirens piercing the otherwise serene morning air. As news of the discovery spread like wildfire, Tybee Island was thrust into the spotlight. The peaceful community, once known for its picturesque beauty and serene atmosphere, was now the center of a chilling murder investigation. Reporters from local news outlets flocked to the scene, their cameras capturing the grim reality that had befallen this idyllic coastal town. The shock and grief that gripped Tybee Island were palpable. The community rallied together, offering support to Eleanor's family and vowing to find justice for their beloved neighbor. Candlelight vigils were held in her honor, with tearful residents coming together to remember the kind-hearted woman whose life had been cut short. As the investigation unfolded, the media frenzy surrounding the case intensified. News outlets across the state covered the story, speculating about possible motives and suspects. The town that was once known for its tranquility now found itself under the harsh glare of the true crime gaze. On that fateful morning of August 11, 2009, the peaceful community of Tybee Island, Georgia was shaken to its core when the naked and lifeless body of Eleanor Jardiance, a beloved member of their close-knit society, was discovered on the beach. The shocking sight sent shockwaves of disbelief throughout the town, leaving its residents in a state of fear and confusion. Lead investigator Detective James Matthews, a seasoned veteran in the field of criminal investigation, arrived at the crime scene along with his partner, Officer Laura Linder. Their presence brought a sense of reassurance to the distraught community, as they knew that justice would be pursued relentlessly. The beach, once a symbol of relaxation and joy, had now transformed into a chilling crime scene. The sand, once golden and inviting, was now stained with the crimson evidence of a brutal murder. Eleanor had been ruthlessly shot to death, a fact that sent shockwaves through the hearts of the residents who had known her as a kind-hearted and gentle woman. With meticulous precision, Detective Matthews and Officer Linder began their investigation. Every inch of the crime scene was examined with utmost care, as they sought to uncover any clue that could lead them to the perpetrator. They combed through the sand, collecting samples and preserving any potential evidence that could shed light on this heinous crime. The forensic team was called in to assist with the investigation, utilizing state-of-the-art techniques to analyze the collected evidence. Fingerprints were meticulously lifted, DNA samples were carefully processed, and ballistics experts examined the bullet casings found near the crime scene. Every piece of evidence was crucial in piecing together the puzzle that would ultimately reveal the identity of Eleanor's killer. The investigation into Eleanor Jardian's murder would prove to be a challenging and complex endeavor, but the determination and unwavering commitment of Detective Matthews, Officer Linder, and the entire police force would not waver. They vowed to bring justice to Eleanor and restore peace to the shattered community. Ben Jardiance, aged 41, emerged as the prime suspect in the shocking murder of Eleanor Jardiance, his stepmother. Ben, known for his charismatic charm and smooth-talking nature, had always presented himself as a caring and devoted family member. However, as the investigation unfolded, a darker side of his character began to surface. Behind his affable exterior lay a web of secrets and resentment. Eleanor, in a twisted and manipulative move, had coerced Ben into a decades-long sexual relationship to secure his inheritance and substantial allowance. This revelation sent shockwaves through the small seaside community of Tybee Island, Georgia, where the murder took place. The police wasted no time in interrogating Ben, hoping to uncover the truth behind Eleanor's brutal demise. Detective James Matthews and his partner, Officer Laura Linder, skillfully probed Ben, their questions piercing through his carefully constructed facade. The interrogation room buzzed with tension as the investigators sought to unravel the complex mix of emotions that Ben displayed. Ben's response to the interrogation was a delicate balance of anger, calmness, and evasion. He vehemently denied any involvement in Eleanor's murder, claiming to have been at a local coffee shop during the time of her death. The investigators painstakingly cross-referenced his alibi, meticulously examining CCTV footage and interviewing witnesses from the coffee shop. However, they found no concrete evidence to either confirm or refute his claims. As the investigation progressed, the media frenzy surrounding the case intensified. Local newspapers, such as the Tybee Island Times, splashed headlines about the murder across their front pages, captivating the attention of the community. The police continued their relentless pursuit of justice, leaving no stone unturned in their quest for the truth. They meticulously combed through phone records, financial transactions, and witness testimonies, piecing together a timeline of events leading up to Eleanor's murder. Every detail, no matter how seemingly insignificant, was scrutinized in their pursuit of justice. Cynthia Jardiance, aged 45, the wife of Ben Jardiance and stepdaughter of the late Eleanor Jardiance from her first husband, emerged as the second suspect in the shocking murder case that gripped the small community of Tybee Island, Georgia. Known for her elegance and refined taste, Cynthia presented herself as a supportive spouse to her husband and loving mother to their daughter, Aroma. However, behind her polished exterior lay a web of secrets and a calculating, ambitious nature. According to the police investigation, Cynthia was forced into a sexual relationship with Eleanor, her stepmother, as a means to maintain her family's financial status. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community as the residents struggled to come to terms with the dark secrets that had been unearthed within the Jardiance family. During the intense interrogation, Cynthia's demeanor fluctuated between anger, calmness, and denial. She vehemently denied any involvement in the murder, insisting that she loved Eleanor like a mother and would never harm her. However, the evidence gathered by the police paints a different picture. Investigators uncovered a series of incriminating emails exchanged between Cynthia and Eleanor, discussing their illicit relationship, including graphic descriptions of how Eleanor wanted her stepdaughter to perform sexually. These emails, along with other pieces of evidence, raised suspicions about Cynthia's motive for murder. As the investigation into Cynthia Jardiance's involvement in the murder unfolds, the community anxiously awaited answers. Would justice be served, or will the secrets of Tybee Island continue to haunt its residents? In the ongoing investigation into the shocking murder of Eleanor Jardiance, a new suspect emerged. Harold Beechers, a seemingly friendly neighbor of the victim, became the focus of intense scrutiny. Known for his outgoing personality and close bond with Eleanor, Harold's involvement in this perplexing case raised eyebrows within the tight-knit community of Tybee Island, Georgia. Harold, a middle-aged man with a penchant for Hawaiian shirts, had always been a familiar face in the neighborhood. He was often seen engaging in friendly conversations with Eleanor, sharing gardening tips and discussing the latest bestsellers. However, beneath his amiable facade, Harold harbored a secret sexual obsession with the elderly woman. The police, armed with newfound evidence from the letters discovered in a secluded cove, turned their attention to Harold. They sought to unravel the depths of his infatuation and determine if it played a role in Eleanor's untimely demise. The interrogation room was tense as Detective James Matthews and Officer Laura Linder questioned Harold, hoping to extract the truth from him. During the interrogation, Harold's emotions were clearly in turmoil. Anger, guilt, and confusion were etched across his face as he struggled to provide coherent answers. The investigators pressed him on the nature of his relationship with Eleanor, delving into the depths of his obsession. Harold's voice trembled as he admitted to the infatuation he had nurtured in secret, but vehemently denied any involvement in her murder. As the questioning continued, Harold's demeanor shifted. He became increasingly defensive, lashing out at the detectives and insisting on his innocence. The investigation team meticulously probed for inconsistencies, seeking to determine if Harold's obsession had driven him to commit this heinous crime. The weight of suspicion hung heavy in the air as the detectives scrutinized his every word and gesture. In the days following the interrogation, the police tirelessly combed through Harold's background, searching for any evidence that could link him to the murder. They interviewed friends, family, and acquaintances, piecing together a profile of the man behind the friendly facade. The media, hungry for details, began speculating on Harold's possible involvement, sensationalizing the case and fueling public interest. The community of Tybee Island remained on edge. The truth behind Eleanor Jardiance's murder remained elusive, and the search for justice intensified. The police, determined to bring closure to this tragic case, left no stone unturned in their relentless pursuit of the truth. In a stunning twist, the investigation into the murder of Eleanor Jardiance took a dramatic turn, revealing Cynthia Jardiance, the stepdaughter of the victim, as the mastermind behind this heinous crime. The motive behind Cynthia's actions was a toxic level of exhaustion and her drive for wealth. This shocking revelation sent shockwaves through the close-knit community of Tybee Island, Georgia, where the murder took place. Cynthia Jardiance, a woman of elegance and refined taste, had long portrayed herself as a supportive spouse to her husband Ben and loving mother to her daughter, Aroma. However, beneath her polished exterior lay a dark and manipulative nature. The investigation uncovered that Cynthia had been forced into a sexual relationship with Eleanor, her stepmother and main financial provider, as a means to maintain her family's financial status. This disturbing revelation sheds light on the intricate web of deceit and manipulation that surrounded Eleanor's murder. The police diligently pursued this lead, and it was the discovery of a hidden stash of letters in a secluded cove that provided a breakthrough in the case. These letters exposed the secret anger Cynthia had towards Eleanor. The letters revealed her deep-seated hatred for Eleanor, whom she loathed for her voracious sexual appetite, sometimes forcing Cynthia to have sex with her 3 or even 4 times a day. Cynthia saw Eleanor's sizable estate as the only way to secure her family's financial future. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Cynthia's actions were not driven by a momentary lapse in judgment, but rather a calculated plan to eliminate Eleanor. The police gathered evidence, piecing together the puzzle to bring Cynthia to justice. The interrogation of Cynthia revealed a mix of anger, calmness, and denial as she attempted to evade responsibility for her actions. Finally, the authorities were able to identify Cynthia Jardiance as the prime suspect and subsequently arrested her. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community as the residents grappled with the realization that one of their own was capable of such a heinous act. As the trial began, the community of Tybee Island, Georgia, remained in a state of disbelief. The once idyllic seaside community had been forever changed by this tragic event. And as the trial unfolded, the truth behind this shocking crime will be revealed, bringing closure to a community in mourning. The highly anticipated trial of Cynthia Jardiance, the mastermind behind the shocking murder of Eleanor Jardiance, took place in the small coastal town of Tybee Island, Georgia. The courtroom was packed with curious onlookers, eager to witness the conclusion of this gripping true crime case. Prosecutor Sarah McPherson, known for her tenacious pursuit of justice, presented a compelling argument against Cynthia. She meticulously laid out the evidence, painting a vivid picture of Cynthia's greed and calculated actions. McPherson highlighted the disturbing nature of the murder plot, emphasizing how Cynthia's desire for wealth and power drove her to orchestrate the heinous crime. In her opening statement, McPherson described the chilling discovery of Eleanor's naked body on the beach, sending shockwaves through the tight-knit community. She recounted how the police swiftly responded to the crime scene, collecting crucial evidence that would later link Cynthia to the murder. Throughout the trial, McPherson called upon witnesses who had been entangled in the web of deceit surrounding Eleanor's murder. These witnesses, including Patty O'Hurley, the retiree who stumbled upon the crime scene, and the local fisherman who discovered the hidden stash of letters, provided crucial testimony that solidified the prosecution's case. Defense attorney Marley Hobart Greaves, known for his ability to sway juries, presented a different narrative. He argued that Cynthia's actions were driven by sexual exhaustion and emotional turmoil from her coerced relationship with the victim, painting her as a victim of circumstance rather than a cold-blooded murderer. Hobart Greaves pleaded for leniency, urging the jury to consider the toll that Eleanor's manipulation had taken on Cynthia's mental state. As the trial progressed, the courtroom was filled with tension and emotion. The media circus surrounding the trial only added to the intensity, with reporters from local news outlets capturing every moment for the public to devour. After days of compelling arguments and emotional testimonies, the jury retired to deliberate. The verdict, delivered with a mix of relief and disappointment, found Cynthia guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in a cacophony of reactions, gasps of disbelief from Cynthia's supporters and tears of relief from Eleanor's family and friends. In a final act of justice, the judge sentenced Cynthia to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The impact of the verdict reverberated through the community, forever changing the lives of those involved. Tybee Island, once known for its idyllic beaches and close-knit community, would forever be marked by the tragic events of August 2009. After the highly publicized trial, the lives of those involved in the shocking murder of Eleanor Jardiance took a dramatic turn. Cynthia, now incarcerated, would spend the rest of her life behind bars, reflecting on the choices that led to her downfall. Ben, Eleanor's stepson and Cynthia's husband, faced public scrutiny and the weight of his complicity in the crime. Cynthia's daughter, Aroma, was left to navigate the aftermath of her mother's actions, forever changed by the revelation of her family's dark secrets. Meanwhile, the police continued their tireless pursuit of justice, ensuring that no stone was left unturned. Detective James Matthews and Officer Laura Linder, the lead investigators in the case, remained committed to uncovering any lingering mysteries surrounding Eleanor's murder. Their dedication to the truth brought solace to the community, knowing that justice had been served. The impact of this shocking crime rippled through Tybee Island, leaving a lasting mark on the close-knit community. The residents, once known for their tranquility, found themselves grappling with the harsh reality that darkness can lurk even in the most idyllic of places. And thus, we conclude this episode of True Crime Case Files. The story of Eleanor Jardiance's murder serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most idyllic communities. David Hale was a 41-year-old man who lived in Ardmore, Oklahoma, a small town known for its conservative values and tight-knit community. He owned a successful car dealership in town, Hale Auto Sales, which had been in his family for generations. He was a well-respected businessman, known for his honesty and integrity. David was also a deacon at the local Baptist church, where he was deeply involved in community events. On the outside, David seemed like the perfect family man, hardworking, kind, and committed to his wife, Anne, and their daughter, Macy. But beneath this clean-cut image, David carried a heavy secret. For years, he struggled with his sexuality, which was at odds with the traditional values of his town and his church. This inner turmoil led him to live a double life,
often traveling to Oklahoma City and Dallas for anonymous sex with other men. While he was devoted to his family in many ways, David felt emotionally distant from them, especially as his marriage to Ann had grown cold and loveless. In the years before his death, he struggled to reconcile his true sexual feelings with the life he felt obligated to lead.
One of those sexual relationships was with Hunter Davis, his daughter Macy's 18-year-old boyfriend. Hunter, a high school football star, had grown close to David after Macy introduced him to the family. On the surface, David acted as a mentor to Hunter, offering him guidance, helping him find work at the dealership, and even giving him financial support. But in reality, David was using this mentorship as a way to Hunter into a secret sexual relationship with him. David's double life began to catch up with him in the summer of 2021. His daughter, Macy, had just graduated from high school and was looking forward to starting classes at a local community college. She was excited about her future and was planning to marry Hunter that fall. David, meanwhile, was struggling to keep his affair hidden while managing the growing tension in his home. Macy, always close with her father, started to notice his strange behavior but was clueless to what was really going on. In the days leading up to his death, David seemed distracted, his mind clearly on more than just his business and family obligations. He spent more time than usual in private, often taking long drives late at night or shutting himself away in his home office.
His double life was finally unraveling, leading to the fateful confrontation that would cost him his life. On the morning of August 14, 2021, at around 7:00 a.m., David Hale's body was found by his daughter, Macy, in the bathroom of their home. It was a Saturday, and like many small towns, Ardmore, Oklahoma was quiet. Macy had woken up early, planning to go out for breakfast at Denny's with her boyfriend Hunter. She knocked on her father's bathroom door but got no answer. When she opened it, she was met with a horrific sight. David was lying on the cold tile floor, a pool of blood surrounding him. The bathroom mirror was splattered, and the handgun that David kept for protection was lying on the floor next to his lifeless hand. Macy screamed, dropping her phone as she stood frozen in shock. After a few moments, she ran back to her room, grabbed her phone off the floor, and called 911. Macy's voice trembled as she spoke to the dispatcher, struggling to explain what had happened. Her mind raced as she replayed the events of the last few days, trying to make sense of how her father, the man she had looked up to all her life, could now be dead. The dispatcher tried to calm her down, asking her to stay on the line until help arrived. Macy remained panicked, pacing back and forth between the bathroom and the living room, trying to catch her breath. Within minutes, the first responders arrived at the Hale residence, a modest ranch-style house on the outskirts of town. The paramedics quickly confirmed what Macy already knew: her father was dead. As the reality set in, Macy collapsed onto the front porch, tears streaming down her face. Her world had been turned upside down in an instant. News of the tragedy spread quickly throughout Ardmore. In a town where gossip moved fast, especially in the age of Facebook and local news websites, word of David Hale's death shocked the entire community. Neighbors began gathering outside the Hale house, whispering and speculating about what could have happened to the man they knew as a kind and upstanding citizen. Macy was taken to the police station shortly after her father's body was found. Still in shock, she could barely process what was happening. Her mother, Ann, had been out of town visiting her sister in Tulsa and was on her way back, completely unaware of the nightmare awaiting her. By mid-morning, the small, quiet town of Ardmore was buzzing with confusion, fear, and rumors about what had led to the death of David Hale. The Ardmore Police Department arrived on the scene around 7:30 a.m. on August 14, 2021, less than 30 minutes after Macy Hale made the frantic 911 call. Lead investigator Detective Greg Marshall, a seasoned officer with over 15 years on the force, was known for his methodical approach to crime scenes. The bathroom where David Hale's body was found was small but recently renovated, with white walls and white tile flooring. It was a mess. Blood had pooled around David's head, and splatters covered the sink, mirror, and walls. The handgun, a Smith & Wesson .38, lay on the floor near David's right hand. It was clear that David had been shot at close range. The bullet had entered his chest, leaving no chance for survival. The detectives took in the details. The rest of the house was undisturbed. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, and nothing appeared to be stolen. It seemed unlikely that this was a robbery gone wrong, especially in a town like Ardmore, where violent crime was rare. Detective Marshall knelt next to the body, noting the position of the gun and David's hand.
There was no indication of a struggle in the bathroom, but something about the scene felt off to him. He had another officer to dust for fingerprints on the gun and check for any other trace evidence in the room. He also requested a thorough examination of David's phone, which was sitting on the counter next to the sink. Marshall knew that in today's world, people's phones often held secrets, and he suspected David's would be no different. As the investigation continued, the police used luminol, a chemical agent, to check for any blood traces that might have been cleaned up elsewhere in the house. The only blood present was in the bathrooms, suggesting that David had been killed there and not moved after his death. Crime scene photographers documented every angle, making sure nothing was missed. By noon, the detectives had gathered all the evidence they could from the scene. The body was taken to the local coroner for a full autopsy, which would later confirm that David had died from a single gunshot wound to the chest. As Marshall wrapped up their initial investigation, it was clear they were dealing with more than just a simple accident or home invasion. Something much more personal had happened here. Macy Hale, David's 18-year-old daughter, was the first person the police questioned. Still in shock after finding her father's body, she was taken to the Ardmore Police Department later that morning. Detective Greg Marshall knew this would be a delicate interrogation. Macy was emotional, her face pale, and her hands trembling as she sat in the small, windowless interview room. Macy was fresh out of high school with plans to start community college in the fall. She was known around town for her outgoing personality and dedication to soccer, often seen at the local field in her Adidas gear. Her relationship with her father had always seemed strong, though in recent weeks, according to friends, Macy had been quieter and more withdrawn. Detective Marshall wanted to understand why. He started the interview gently, asking Macy about her relationship with her father. Macy described her dad as a hardworking man, always at the car dealership, but still making time for Sunday dinners in church. Her voice wavered as she recalled how their relationship had recently changed. Just days before the murder, Macy had discovered something shocking that shattered her world. She had found sexually explicit messages on her boyfriend Hunter's phone, revealing an affair between Hunter and her father. Macy's discovery had left her devastated, and the detectives could see the raw emotion on her face as she talked. She felt betrayed by both men and didn't know how to handle the situation. "I just wanted things to go back to normal," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't want to believe what I saw." Marshall listened carefully. The motive for Macy to be involved in her father's death was clear: anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. However, as the interrogation continued, Macy insisted that despite her rage, she would never hurt her father. Her alibi was solid, too. On the night of the murder, she had spent most of the evening with Hunter, who she still loved despite his affair with her father, and several friends had seen them together at a local ice cream shop, Brahms, a popular spot in Ardmore. Surveillance footage from the store confirmed her presence there, giving her an airtight alibi for the time of the crime. Though Macy's emotional state and recent discovery pointed to her as a potential suspect, the detectives ultimately found no physical evidence linking her to the murder. Marshall, however, couldn't shake the feeling that this family's secrets ran much deeper than they appeared. Next on the police's list of suspects was Ann Hale, David's 39-year-old wife. Ann had been married to David for 20 years and was well known in Ardmore for her deep involvement in the church and the local community. As a stay-at-home mom, she spent much of her time organizing church events, leading Bible study groups, and volunteering at the local food pantry. Outwardly, Ann appeared to have the perfect life: a loving husband, a bright daughter, and a strong reputation in their conservative town. However, as the detectives dug deeper, they uncovered cracks in her seemingly perfect marriage. Friends and neighbors described the relationship between Ann and David as strained. Over the past few years, the two had grown distant, with David spending more time at his car dealership and Ann pouring herself into church activities. It was no secret that their loveless marriage lacked the intimacy it once had. Detective Greg Marshall brought Ann in for questioning 2 days after the murder. When she walked into the police station, she looked tired and grief-stricken, her eyes red from crying. Dressed in a simple floral dress, Ann clutched a tissue in her hand as she sat down across from the investigators. At first, Ann seemed cooperative, answering questions about her husband's routine in their marriage. She admitted that things hadn't been the same between them for a long time. "We were more like roommates than husband and wife," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't remember the last time he touched me." But when the detectives brought up the affair between David and Hunter, Ann's demeanor changed. She seemed shocked at the news, almost as if she couldn't believe it.
As the interrogation continued, the detectives pressed her about her whereabouts the night of the murder. Anne claimed she had been out of town visiting her sister in Tulsa. It was on her way back, completely unaware of the nightmare awaiting her. Her story seemed plausible, but the police couldn't ignore the fact that Anne had a clear motive. The betrayal of both her husband and her daughter's boyfriend would be enough to push anyone over the edge.
Anne's emotions were a mix of grief and anger during the interrogation. She maintained her innocence, but didn't deny that the revelation of the affair had deeply affected her. Still, like her daughter, Anne had no physical evidence linking her to the murder, and the detectives knew they needed more to definitively rule her out or confirm her involvement. On the morning of August 23, 2021, just 2 days after David Hale's murder, Ardmore detectives received a crucial break in the case. It was a humid, overcast day with temperatures in the low 90s, and the conservative town was still buzzing with spicy gossip about the crime. At around 10 a.m., Detective Greg Marshall got a call from the forensics lab. The teen had found a key piece of evidence that had been overlooked during the initial search of the Hale home. The gun used to kill David had traces of fingerprints on it, but they didn't belong to Anne or Macy. The detectives quickly returned to the Hale residence to re-examine the crime scene. The house had already been searched extensively, but this new development prompted another, more thorough inspection as they started retracing their steps through the house. The bathroom where David was found was still cordoned off, with unclean bloodstains still marking the spot where his body had been discovered. The gun, a Smith & Wesson revolver, had been carefully bagged as evidence, but now the forensic report gave them a new direction. The fingerprints on the gun matched Hunter Davis, Macy's boyfriend, who had been close to the family in many different ways for the past 2 years. This revelation raised immediate questions. Why were Hunter's prints on the gun? And what was his role in the murder? Detective Marshall recalled that during his brief initial interview, Hunter had seemed nervous but not overly suspicious. He had mentioned being with Macy at Braun's ice cream shop that evening, where several friends had confirmed his alibi. However, the prints on the gun painted a different picture, one that placed Hunter at the crime scene. The detectives knew they had to proceed carefully. They contacted Hunter and asked him to come in for a follow-up interview. Meanwhile, they began piecing together his connection to the Hale family. David had taken Hunter under his wing, offering him a job at the dealership and financial support in exchange for illicit sex. But the discovery of the affair had turned everything upside down. The new evidence gave the detectives more questions than answers, but it was clear that Hunter's involvement was deeper than they had initially thought. As the investigation progressed, the team felt they were getting closer to uncovering the truth. For the first time since the murder, they had a tangible lead that could break the case wide open. Hunter Davis, Macy Hale's 18-year-old boyfriend, quickly became the focus of the investigation after the discovery of his fingerprints on the gun that killed David Hale. Hunter, a well-known football star at Ardmore High School, had charmed most of the town with his athletic abilities and friendly demeanor. But behind that image was a troubled young man who had grown up in a difficult home environment. His mother struggled with drug addiction, and his father had long battled alcoholism. David Hale had stepped in as a parental figure, offering Hunter a summer job at his car dealership and even giving him a place to stay when things got rough at home. When Hunter arrived at the Ardmore Police Department for his second interview, the tension in the room was palpable. Detective Greg Marshall was ready to confront him with the new evidence. Hunter looked uneasy as he sat down, his hands fidgeting on the table. Wearing a faded Sooners t-shirt and jeans, he no longer carried the confident swagger he was known for on the football field. The detectives began by asking Hunter to walk them through the night of the murder again. He repeated his story. He had been with Macy at Brahms, grabbing burgers and shakes. But when confronted with the fingerprint evidence, his face went pale. He stammered, trying to explain how his prints could have ended up on the gun, and swore he didn't kill him. The detectives pressed him further, asking about his sexual relationship with David. Hunter hesitated before admitting that David had been more than just a mentor. He was his lover. Their relationship had turned into something so intense and passionate Hunter didn't know how to handle. He felt trapped, loyal to Macy, but manipulated by David, who had both helped him financially and used him for sex. "I didn't want any of this," Hunter said, his voice cracking. As the interrogation continued, Hunter's emotional state shifted from defensive to desperate. He denied any involvement in David's death, but seemed genuinely conflicted. He insisted that he loved Macy and wanted nothing to do with David anymore, but the detectives weren't convinced. His prints on the gun, and his history with David were enough to keep him under suspicion. Though Hunter's responses were emotional and at times erratic, the detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence before they could determine his true role in David's murder. For now, Hunter remained one of the prime suspects, his relationship with the victim casting a long shadow over the investigation. On August 27, 2021, just before dawn, the Ardmore Police Department at last pieced together the tragic truth. After weeks of investigation and numerous interviews, they finally identified the murderer, Macy Hale, David's 18-year-old daughter. Macy had been the last person anyone expected to commit such a crime. To the outside world, she was a bright, driven young woman with a passion for soccer and plans for college. But beneath her calm exterior, she had been harboring an overwhelming storm of anger and betrayal. The investigation turned in Macy's direction when her mother, Ann Hale, provided police with a shocking detail. Macy had discovered sexually explicit messages between her father and her boyfriend, Hunter Davis, just days before the murder. This revelation gave Macy both the motive and the means to kill her father. The police immediately re-examined Macy's alibi. She had claimed she was at Brahms, a local fast food chain, with Hunter at the time of the murder. But surveillance footage from that night told a different story. The timestamp didn't match up with the timeline Macy had given during her initial interview. That, combined with forensic evidence linking her to the scene, sealed her fate. The night of August 27, police arrived at the Hale family home, where Macy was staying with her mother. The quiet Ardmore neighborhood, known for its conservative values, was suddenly buzzing with the sight of flashing lights and officers surrounding the house. Detective Greg Marshall, who had been leading the investigation, knocked on the door. Anne answered, visibly shaken, but Macy stood behind her, her face expressionless. "Macy Hale, you are under arrest for the murder of David Hale," Marshall said calmly as he read her rights. Macy showed no visible shock. Instead, she remained eerily calm, as if she had already accepted her fate. She complied with the arrest without resistance. As Macy was handcuffed and led to the police cruiser, Anne Hale collapsed onto the front porch, sobbing uncontrollably so much she even peed herself. The reality that her own daughter had killed her husband was too much to bear. Neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, whispering in disbelief at what had happened in their small, close-knit community. For the Hale family, life would never be the same again. The arrest brought some answers, but it left a trail of devastation in its wake. Macy Hale's trial began on August 31, 2022, in Ardmore, Oklahoma. The courtroom was packed with community members, reporters from local outlets like the Ardmore Daily, and members of the Hale family. The trial was a focal point of local news, given the shockwaves the murder had sent through this small, tight-knit town. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Michael Granger, argued that Macy Hale had acted out of anger and betrayal. Granger, known for his meticulous approach, presented evidence showing that Macy had discovered inappropriate messages between her father, David Hale, and her boyfriend, Hunter Davis. The prosecution claimed that this discovery had pushed Macy to murder her father in a fit of rage. The key evidence included the murder weapon, David's handgun, and Macy's fingerprints on it. Granger painted a picture of a young woman overwhelmed by jealousy and heartbreak, unable to control her emotions. Macy's defense attorney, Lula Ray McDonald, a 72-year-old veteran lawyer with a reputation for defending difficult cases, argued that Macy had acted in a moment of extreme emotional distress. McDonald pointed out that Macy had no prior criminal record and had been a loving daughter before discovering the affair. She claimed that Macy's actions were the result of a severe emotional breakdown rather than premeditated murder. McDonald asked the jury to consider Macy's age and mental state when making their decision. Throughout the trial, Macy's mother, Ann Hale, sat in the courtroom, her face a mask of grief and confusion. The emotional strain was visible on her face, and she often wiped tears from her eyes. Her reaction was one of devastation, reflecting the loss of both her husband and the relationship with her daughter. Macy herself appeared somber, rarely making eye contact with the audience or her mother. On September 10, 2022, the jury returned a verdict of guilty of second-degree murder. The verdict was met with mixed reactions from the community. Some felt justice had been served, while others were saddened by the tragic outcome. The judge sentenced Macy to 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. For the Hale family, the trial marked the end of a harrowing chapter. Macy's conviction brought a sense of closure, but it also left deep wounds in the family and the community.
The tragic events had forever changed the lives of everyone involved. After Macy Hale's trial, the impact on those involved was profound. Ardmore, Oklahoma, a town known for its close-knit community and traditional values, had been shaken by the murder and the subsequent legal proceedings. Macy Hale, now serving a 25-year sentence at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center in McLeod, Oklahoma, faced a life drastically different from the one she had planned. Her time in prison was marked by isolation and regret. The once bright future she had envisioned, including her plans for college and a career, had been replaced by a harsh reality. Macy's story was widely covered in local media, including the Ardmore Daily and news stations like Cake XI-TV. The media coverage, while providing updates on her case, also served as a constant reminder of the tragic events and the lives changed forever. Anne Hale, David's widow, struggled to find normalcy in her life. She had to deal with the loss of her husband and the betrayal of her daughter. Anne, known for her involvement in local church activities and charity events, found solace in her faith. She continued to lead Bible study groups at the church, but did so with a heavy heart. The community rallied around her, offering support and condolences. Despite the support, Anne found it difficult to move past the betrayal and the fractured family relationships. Hunter Davis, Macy's former boyfriend, also faced significant challenges. After the murder, Hunter left Ardmore and went to live with relatives in a different state. His reputation as a high school football star was tarnished by his involvement in the scandal. Hunter attempted to rebuild his life away from the media spotlight, focusing on finding a job and starting over. However, the emotional scars from the affair and the murder remained with him, affecting his relationships and self-esteem. In summary, the lives of Macy Hale, Anne Hale, and Hunter Davis were forever altered by the murder. The community of Ardmore continued to deal with the emotional aftermath, trying to find healing in the wake of such a profound tragedy. Laura Wilkie, age 35, was a journalist with an unwavering determination to expose corruption. Running her blog, Ocala After Dark, she fearlessly investigated local true crime stories and political figures. Laura possessed a sharp wit and infectious laughter that drew people to her. In her spare time, she enjoyed painting landscapes and exploring the hidden gems of the city. During the hot summer of July 2007, Ocala was buzzing with activity. The city's annual music festival, Ocala Jam Fest, brought together music lovers from all over the state. Laura, always on the lookout for a captivating story, attended the festival, documenting the vibrant atmosphere and interviewing both the up-and-coming and established bands. Her blog post about the event garnered attention from music enthusiasts and fellow journalists alike. But Laura's true passion lay in exposing the underbelly of the city. She dug deep into the lives of local politicians, unearthing scandals and shining a light on their questionable dealings. Her investigative pieces, such as the mayor's hidden secrets and the dark side of Ocala's elite, became the talk of the town. The local newspaper, Ocala Gazette, even featured her work on the front page, acknowledging her relentless pursuit of truth. Laura's determination, however, came with risks. She received anonymous threats and warnings to stay away from certain individuals. Yet, she remained undeterred, convinced that the truth needed to be revealed. Her latest investigation involved a prominent car dealership owner, Jonathan Range Rover Reed, who was rumored to have ties to organized crime. Laura delved into his background, following a trail of suspicious transactions and connections that led her deeper into the dangerous underworld. Little did Laura know her relentless pursuit of justice would have dire consequences. On a sweltering July afternoon, she received a tip about a secret meeting between Reed and a corrupt city council member. Determined to capture the evidence, Laura set up surveillance near a local coffee shop, Brood Awakening. As she discreetly snapped photographs, she had no idea that someone was poisoning her, eventually leaving her bedridden and, finally, dead. On the scorching morning of July 12, 2007, tragedy struck the quiet city of Ocala, Florida. At precisely 9 a.m., Jay Wilkie, the husband of renowned journalist Laura Wilkie, made a horrifying discovery that would forever change his life. The day had started like any other in the Wilkie household. The sun beat down mercilessly on the small suburban neighborhood as residents sought refuge in the coolness of their air-conditioned homes. But little did Jay know that this day would mark the beginning of a dark and perplexing chapter in his life. As Jay entered the bedroom, he was met with a sight that would haunt him for the rest of his days. There, lying motionless on the neatly made bed, was Laura, his beloved wife. Her once vibrant eyes were now closed forever, and her body lay still, as if frozen in time. The room was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by Jay's gasp of disbelief. The authorities were immediately summoned to the scene, their sirens piercing the otherwise tranquil neighborhood. As they meticulously combed through the room, searching for any clues that could shed light on this mysterious death, the air was thick with tension and uncertainty. In the days following Laura's untimely demise, the media frenzy surrounding the case reached a fever pitch. Headlines screamed with speculation, and armchair detectives dissected every detail, desperately trying to piece together the puzzle. News outlets like the Ocala Gazette and the Florida Times-Union dedicated countless column inches to the investigation, as the city held its breath, waiting for answers. As the investigation continued, the city of Ocala held its breath, anxiously awaiting the day when the truth behind Laura Wilkie's death would finally be unveiled. But for now, the answers remained elusive, shrouded in a web of secrecy and unanswered questions. In the heart of Ocala, a city known for its picturesque landscapes and vibrant community, a shocking crime took place that would leave the town in a state of disbelief. Laura Wilkie, a respected journalist and fearless investigator, met a tragic end on the scorching morning of July 12, 2007. Detectives Olivia Grisly and Mark Hastur, renowned for their meticulous approach to investigations, swiftly arrived at the scene. The Ocala Police Department was determined to solve this heinous crime and bring justice to Laura and her grieving loved ones. As they entered the house, a sense of eerie calm hung in the air. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the killer had either been known to Laura or possessed a level of cunning that allowed them to gain access undetected. The detectives meticulously combed through every inch of the crime scene, searching for any clue that could shed light on Laura's untimely demise. The house appeared immaculately clean, as if someone had meticulously tidied up after the crime. However, their attention was soon drawn to the cause of death: poisoning. The exact substance used remained a mystery, leaving the investigators puzzled and determined to uncover the truth. With a keen eye for detail, the detectives photographed every inch of the crime scene, capturing potential DNA samples and any other evidence that could potentially lead them to the killer. They knew that in order to solve this perplexing case, they would need to leave no stone unturned. As the investigation unfolded, the town of Ocala was gripped with a sense of unease. The investigation into Laura Wilkie's murder would prove to be a complex puzzle, one that would challenge the detectives' skills and test their resolve. As the summer heat continued to bear down on Ocala, the search for the truth intensified, leaving the town anxiously awaiting the day when justice would finally be served. The initial focus of the investigation turned towards Jay Wilkie, a 49-year-old man who owned a flourishing gardening supply store in Ocala, Florida. Known for his friendly demeanor and charm, Jay was a familiar face in the community, often seen mingling with customers and offering expert advice on horticulture. However, beneath this amiable facade, there were whispers of a darker side. Detectives Olivia Grisly and Mark Hastur, leading the investigation, delved into Jay's relationship with his wife Laura, searching for any clues that could shed light on a possible motive. They meticulously pieced together the puzzle of their marriage, uncovering a history of turbulence and hidden tensions. Friends and acquaintances were interviewed, and a pattern of arguments and heated exchanges emerged. As the detectives delved deeper into Jay's personal life, they discovered a series of text messages exchanged between him and Laura in the weeks leading up to her tragic demise. The messages were from Laura begging Jay to not go near her, something that obviously indicated cracks in the foundation of their marriage. The detectives, determined to uncover the truth, obtained a warrant to search Jay's phone records, hoping to find more evidence that could connect him to Laura's murder. Simultaneously, the investigators scoured the city for any potential witnesses who may have seen or heard something on the day of the crime. They examined surveillance footage from nearby establishments, hoping to catch a glimpse of any suspicious individuals lurking in the vicinity of Laura's home. As the case gained media attention, tips flooded in from concerned citizens, each one meticulously followed up on by the diligent detectives. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation seemed to hit a dead end.
The detectives meticulously reviewed every piece of evidence, re-examining the crime scene photographs and the DNA samples collected. They consulted with forensic experts, hoping for a breakthrough that would crack the case wide open. Despite the mounting pressure, Jay Wilkie vehemently maintained his innocence. He hired a high-profile defense attorney who spoke to the media on his behalf, proclaiming his client's unwavering belief that the truth would prevail. Clara Pointer, a 28-year-old co-worker and close friend of Laura Wilkie, emerged as a significant person of interest in the ongoing investigation into Laura's untimely death. Clara, like Laura, was a journalist, contributed articles for Laura's blog Ocala After Dark. She was known for her ambition and relentless pursuit of success. Mutual friends whispered about her burning desire to be the head of Ocala After Dark, the popular blog that Laura had built from the ground up. It was believed that Clara's envy of Laura's achievements may have fueled a sinister plot. During the police interrogation, Clara maintained an outwardly calm and collected demeanor, skillfully deflecting any suspicions that arose. She vehemently denied any involvement in Laura's murder, claiming that their friendship was genuine and that she had no reason to harm her colleague. Clara, for her part, pointed instead to Jay as the likely killer. She said Laura was deeply afraid of him, blaming him for the illness that led to her death. Clara said Laura repeatedly told her, "Don't let my husband near me. He wants me dead." However, the investigators uncovered some intriguing details that cast doubt on Clara's innocence. They have obtained surveillance footage from a nearby coffee shop, showing Clara purchasing a bottle of a powerful sedative on the morning of July 12, 2007. The same sedative was found in Laura's system during the autopsy. This evidence, combined with Clara's undeniable ambition and rumored jealousy, raised eyebrows among the authorities. Furthermore, witnesses came forward, claiming that Clara had been overheard making disparaging remarks about Laura's success. One witness, who wished to remain anonymous, reported hearing Clara say, "I should be the one in charge of Ocala After Dark. Laura doesn't deserve all the attention she's getting." Will Clara Pointer's carefully crafted facade crumble under the weight of the evidence against her? Or is there a hidden accomplice who remains undiscovered? Only time will tell as this gripping true crime case unravels before our eyes. A major breakthrough in the investigation of Laura Wilkie's murder occurred on the afternoon of July 17, 2007. The time was precisely 4 p.m., and the blistering heat of Ocala, Florida, remained relentless. Detectives Olivia Gressel and Mark Hastur stumbled upon a crucial piece of evidence that would send shockwaves through the case. In their relentless pursuit of the truth, the detectives had been meticulously sifting through Laura's digital footprint. It was during this painstaking process that they unearthed a series of emails exchanged between Clara Pointer, a close friend and co-worker of Laura's, and David Yarborough, a private investigator renowned in the Ocala area. These emails provided a startling glimpse into the tangled web of deceit surrounding Laura's murder. Clara, it seemed, had been secretly seducing David to sabotage Laura's investigations. The content of the emails indicated that Laura had hired David to delve into the corrupt underbelly of Ocala's car dealership owner Jonathan, Range Rover Reed, with Clara acting as the intermediary. The detectives were astounded by this revelation. It raised a multitude of questions. What had Laura uncovered that was so dangerous? Who were the individuals involved in this web of corruption? And most importantly, why was Laura targeted? The implications of these emails were far-reaching. They suggested a motive for Clara's potential involvement in Laura's murder. Was she driven by jealousy and a desire to take over Ocala After Dark, as rumors had suggested? Or was there something more sinister at play? As the investigation continued to unfold, the detectives were left with a myriad of unanswered questions. What other secrets lay hidden in the depths of Ocala's underbelly? And would they be able to bring Laura's killer to justice? The investigation took an unexpected turn on July 17, 2007, at around 4 p.m., when the Ocala police stumbled upon a series of emails exchanged between Clara Pointer, Laura Wilkie's co-worker and close friend, and David Yarborough, a private investigator hired by Laura to uncover corruption. These emails revealed a connection between Clara and David that raised eyebrows and left investigators scrambling to understand the implications. David Yarborough, a 45-year-old private investigator with a checkered past, had gained a reputation for his resourcefulness and determination in previous cases. He had been involved in Laura's high-profile corruption investigation, which had sent shockwaves through the local political scene. However, whispers began to circulate that David held a personal grudge against Laura for exposing his own misdeeds in the past. As the police interrogated David, his reaction was one of anger and frustration. He vehemently denied any involvement in Laura's murder, maintaining his innocence with unwavering conviction. The investigators delved into David's motives and connections to Clara, seeking to uncover any potential links that could shed light on the case. During the interrogation, David's past came under scrutiny. It was revealed that he had a history of working on high-stakes cases involving corruption and political scandals. Some of his previous clients included prominent figures in the local government, making him a well-known name in the realm of investigative journalism. However, as the investigation into Laura's murder unfolded, David's reputation began to crumble. The police dug deeper into David's personal life, interviewing his acquaintances and examining his financial records. They discovered that David had fallen on hard times in the months leading up to Laura's murder. He had been struggling to make ends meet, with mounting debts and a desperate need for a big break. This revelation raised suspicions about his involvement in Laura's death and added fuel to the growing fire of speculation surrounding the case. As the investigation continued, the police were determined to uncover the truth behind Laura Wilkie's untimely demise. With each new piece of evidence, the web of suspects grew more intricate and the motives became murkier. The clock was ticking, and the Ocala community held its breath, waiting for justice to prevail. In a shocking turn of events, the investigation into the untimely death of Laura Wilkie, the fearless journalist behind the renowned blog Ocala After Dark, took a sinister turn. After days of meticulous detective work, the police uncovered the true mastermind behind Laura's murder, Clara Pointer, a co-worker and friend who harbored a deep-seated jealousy and desire for power. Clara, a 28-year-old ambitious individual, had long coveted Laura's position as the head of Ocala After Dark. Rumors of her envy and resentment towards Laura's success had been circulating for months, but no one could have fathomed the extent of Clara's treachery. The police's breakthrough in the case came on July 17, 2007, when a series of emails between Clara and David Yarborough, a private investigator hired by Laura, were discovered. These emails shed light on Clara's nefarious plans to seduce and manipulate David, who had developed an unhealthy sexual obsession with Laura. David, a 45-year-old private investigator with a checkered past, had a personal vendetta against Laura for exposing his previous misdeeds. However, his twisted infatuation with her led him to inadvertently aid Clara in her sinister plot. The investigation revealed that Clara had been secretly poisoning Laura's coffee for months, gradually weakening her. Laura's haunting words, "Don't let my husband near me. He wants me dead," were uttered in her delirium as Clara's poison took its toll. It is a chilling reminder of the depths of Clara's manipulation and the tragic fate that awaited Laura. But Clara's web of deceit did not end there. She had exploited both Laura's husband, Jay Wilkie, and David, utilizing her sexuality and their vulnerabilities to further her sinister agenda. Clara knew that Jay's troubled marriage and volatile temper would make him an easy target for suspicion. She carefully orchestrated the murder to frame him, all while maintaining her facade of innocence. As the investigation unfolded, the police pieced together Clara's manipulative tactics, exposing the extent of her exploitation. With the evidence against her mounting, the police moved in to arrest Clara at her apartment. Her calculated use of sexuality and the vulnerabilities of those around her showcased a level of cunning that is truly chilling. The trial that followed the shocking murder of Laura Wilkie was nothing short of a gripping spectacle. The courtroom was packed with eager spectators, eager to witness justice being served. District Attorney Unity Collins led the prosecution, presenting a compelling argument that left no room for doubt. She meticulously laid out the evidence, highlighting Clara Pointer's jealousy and calculated actions. The defense attorney, Esmeralda Constable, fought tooth and nail to cast doubt on the evidence and Clara's motives. She argued that the prosecution's case was built on circumstantial evidence and lacked a smoking gun. However, the weight of the evidence against Clara was overwhelming, leaving the defense with an uphill battle. Emotions ran high as Laura's family took their seats in the courtroom. They had endured months of heartache and uncertainty, desperately seeking justice for their beloved daughter. The trial became a battleground of conflicting narratives, with the prosecution painting Clara as a manipulative mastermind and the defense attempting to humanize her, portraying her as a victim of circumstances. Throughout the trial, the jury listened intently to the testimonies of witnesses, examined the physical evidence, and reviewed the damning emails exchanged between Clara and the private investigator, David Yarborough. The emails revealed Clara's sinister plans and her attempts to manipulate both Jay Wilkie and David. After hours of deliberation, the jury delivered their unanimous verdict: guilty. Clara Pointer was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and anguish as Laura's family and friends finally saw justice being served. The impact of the trial rippled through the community, leaving a lasting impression on the residents of Ocala, Florida. The trial became the topic of conversations at local diners and coffee shops, with everyone weighing in on the verdict and its implications. As the trial came to a close, Laura's family and friends were left grappling with the aftermath. The wounds caused by her untimely demise would never fully heal, but the verdict brought them a sense of closure. They could finally begin the process of healing and moving forward, cherishing the memories of Laura and the impact she had on their lives. In the aftermath of the trial, life took on a new normal for all those involved. Jay Wilkie, Laura's husband, who had been falsely accused, felt a mix of relief and grief. He sought solace in rebuilding his life, focusing on his gardening supply store and reconnecting with friends and family. Jay found comfort in the support of the Ocala community, who rallied behind him during the trial. He became an advocate for justice reform, using his own experience to raise awareness about wrongful accusations. David Yarborough, the private investigator who had unwittingly aided Clara Pointer in her plot, was consumed by guilt. He dedicated himself to making amends for his misplaced loyalty. David reached out to Laura's family, offering his sincere apologies and assistance in any way he could. He embarked on a personal journey of redemption, vowing to use his investigative skills for good and help other victims of manipulation and deceit. As time passed, the wounds began to heal, but the memory of Laura Wilkie remained etched in the hearts of those who knew her. The trial had exposed the dark underbelly of jealousy and manipulation, but it also showcased the resilience of a community seeking justice. The impact of Laura's life and untimely death would forever serve as a reminder to cherish the truth and stand against those who seek to deceive. Our story begins with Dave Markerson, a 58-year-old financial analyst living in Fishers, Indiana. Dave was a hardworking man known for his smart mind and calm demeanor. He lived with his second wife, Vivi, and had 2 adult children from his first marriage, Jason and Lana. Dave was well respected in his community and had a stable job that he loved. Dave graduated from Indiana University with a degree in finance. He had a successful career working for a well-known financial firm in Indianapolis. Despite his busy work schedule, Dave always made time for his family. He enjoyed playing chess with his friends at the local chess club and reading mystery novels by authors like Agatha Christie and Arthur Conan Doyle. His favorite book was The Hound of the Baskervilles. Dave's personality was warm and kind. He was always there to help his friends and family. His children, Jason and Lana, loved him dearly. Jason, 25, was trying to find his way in the world and had a complicated relationship with his father. Lana, 24, admired her father and often saw his advice for her event-planning business. In the days before his death, Dave was excited about the upcoming Christmas holiday. He looked forward to spending time with his family and had already bought gifts for everyone. Dave's favorite part of the holiday season was decorating the Christmas tree and watching classic Christmas movies like It's a Wonderful Life and Die Hard. He enjoyed the festive atmosphere and loved seeing the joy on his family's faces. On December 20, 2007, Dave was planning to attend a Christmas party of his office. He was in good spirits and had even picked out a special tie with Santa Claus on it. Dave's last few days were filled with joy and anticipation as he made plans to celebrate Christmas with his loved ones. Dave's friends and colleagues remember him as a dedicated and generous person. His sudden death shocked everyone who knew him. The news of his passing was covered by the local media, and many people in the community mourned his loss. Dave's life seemed perfect on the outside, but he was unaware of the dark secrets that would soon come to light. On the morning of December 21, 2007, it was a cold and cloudy day in Fishers, Indiana. Snowflakes gently fell from the sky, covering the ground in the light dusting of white. Inside the Marcherson home, the Christmas decorations sparkled with festive lights, and a soft holiday tune played on the radio. Lana Marcherson, Dave's 24-year-old daughter, woke up early. She planned to finish some work for her event-playing business before meeting a friend for lunch at the local Applebee's. As she walked down the stairs, she noticed that her father, Dave, wasn't up yet. It was unusual because Dave was always an early riser. Concerned, Lana went to the living room, where she found her father lying on the couch. At first, she thought he was asleep. She called out to him softly, "Dad, it's time to wake up." But Dave didn't move. Lana approached him and gently shook his shoulder. When he still didn't respond, she noticed his skin was cold to the touch. Panic began to set in. Lana's heart raced as she checked for a pulse, but there was none. Overwhelmed with fear and confusion, she called 911. "My dad is not breathing. I think he's dead," she cried, her voice trembling. The dispatcher assured her that help was on the way. Within minutes, emergency responders arrived at the scene. The paramedics confirmed that Dave was dead. Lana was in shock and disbelief, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't understand how her father, who had been healthy and happy just the day before, could be gone. Detective Billy Pestian, a seasoned investigator with the Fishers Police Department, was called to the scene. He observed the living room, noting the cozy, festive setting. Dave's body was lying peacefully on the couch, with no visible signs of trauma. At first glance, it appeared to be a natural death. The news of Dave's sudden passing quickly spread through the community. Friends and neighbors gathered outside the Marcherson home, whispering in hushed tones. The local news station, WTHR Channel 13, reported on Dave's death, highlighting his contributions to the community and his loving family. Lana's discovery of her father's body was a heartbreaking moment that left her in a state of shock. She couldn't comprehend the loss and kept replaying the events in her mind. The once joyful holiday season had turned into a time of mourning and sorrow for the Marcherson family. On December 21, 2007, Detective Billy Pestian arrived promptly at the Marcherson home after receiving the emergency call. It was a cold and cloudy morning, with a light dusting of snow on the ground. Detective Pestian was known for his meticulous attention to detail and calm demeanor. The living room was decorated with festive Christmas lights and a beautifully adorned tree. The scene seemed peaceful, but Detective Pestian sensed something was off. Dave Marcherson's body lay on the couch, appearing as if he had peacefully fallen asleep. There were no signs of a struggle or any visible injuries. The first responders were already there, and the paramedics had confirmed Dave's death. Detective Pestian began his investigation by carefully examining the room. He noticed a teacup on the coffee table next to Dave, which seemed out of place given the circumstances. He instructed the forensic team to collect the teacup and any other potential evidence for further analysis. Detective Pestian then turned his attention to Lana, who was still in shock and being comforted by a neighbor. He gently asked her about the events leading up to the discovery of her father's body. Lana explained that she had found him that morning and immediately called 911. She mentioned that Dave had seemed perfectly fine the night before and had even been looking forward to the office Christmas party. As the investigation continued, Detective Pestian called in the coroner to conduct a preliminary examination of Dave's body. The coroner, Dr. Susan Mancoro, was an experienced professional known for her thoroughness. She noted that while there were no external injuries, Dave's skin had an unusual discoloration. Dr. Taylor suspected poisoning and took samples for toxicology testing. As the day progressed, Detective Pestian received a call from the lab. The preliminary toxicology report indicated the presence of a rare toxin in Dave's system, confirming Dr. Mancoro's suspicion. This discovery changed the course of the investigation, turning it from a potential natural death to a suspected homicide. The first suspect in the case was Vivi Marcherson Greaves, Dave's 19-year-old second wife. Vivi was known for her charm and sociable nature. She worked as an event planner and was well-liked in her community. Vivi often organized memorable events and was known for her attention to detail. However, beneath her friendly exterior, Vivi had a complicated personal life. Detective Billy Pestian and his team arrived at Vivi's office, a local event-planning business in Fishers, Indiana. The office was decorated for the holidays with bright lights and festive decorations. Vivi greeted them with a warm smile, but the detectives noticed a hint of nervousness in her eyes. They asked her to come to the station for questioning. At the police station, Detective Pestian began the interrogation. Vivi seemed calm but cautious. She explained that she had spent the previous evening at home with Dave, watching Hallmark movies and enjoying a quiet night in. When asked about her relationship with Dave, Vivi described it as loving and supportive. However, Detective Pestian pressed further, mentioning rumors of an affair between Vivi and her stepson, Jason. Vivi's demeanor changed slightly. She denied any romantic involvement with Jason, insisting they were just close due to their shared love for event planning. Despite her calm exterior, Vivi's answers were often vague and evasive. The detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence. As the questioning continued, Detective Pestian asked Vivi about the teacup found next to Dave's body. Vivi hesitated before explaining that it was part of their nightly routine for Dave to drink tea before bed. She insisted that she had no idea how the toxin could have gotten into the tea. Her answers seemed rehearsed, and Detective Pestian noted her increasing nervousness. The motive for Vivi was becoming clearer. If she was indeed having an affair with Jason, Dave's death could free her from a loveless marriage and allow her to be with Jason openly. The detectives also discovered financial records showing that Dave had a substantial life insurance policy, with Vivi as the beneficiary. Despite Vivi's calm demeanor, her vague answers and potential motives made her a prime suspect. Detective Pestian knew they needed more evidence to either confirm or rule out her involvement in Dave's death. The investigation into Vivi Markerson Greaves was just beginning, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth behind the murder. As the detectives continued their investigation, they knew they had to dig deeper into Vivi's personal life and her relationship with Jason. The next steps would involve interviewing more people and looking for any inconsistencies in Vivi's story. But truth was out there, and Detective Pestian and his team were committed to finding it. The second suspect in the case was Jason Marcherson, Dave's 25-year-old son. Jason was known for his sharp mind and resourcefulness. He had a complicated relationship with his father and had spent some time in a mental facility. Jason had recently developed a romantic relationship with his stepmother, Vivi, which made him a prime suspect. Detective Billy Pestian and his team arrived at Jason's apartment in downtown Indianapolis. Jason greeted them with a wary look, aware of the gravity of the situation. The detectives asked him to come to the station for questioning. At the police station, Detective Pestian began the interrogation. Jason seemed calm but guarded. He explained that he had been at his apartment the night before Dave's death, working on a project. When asked about his relationship with his father, Jason admitted that they had their differences but insisted that he would never harm him. Detective Pestian then brought up the rumors of Jason's affair with Vivi. Jason's calm demeanor faltered slightly. He admitted to having feelings for Vivi, but denied any involvement in Dave's death. He claimed that their relationship was consensual and that they had planned to talk to Dave about it after the holidays. The detectives pressed further, asking Jason about his recent financial troubles. Jason revealed that he had been struggling with an addiction to marijuana and had been borrowing money from his father to support his habit. He also admitted that he had been blackmailing Vivi for money, threatening to expose their affair if she didn't pay him. The motive for Jason was becoming clearer. If Dave were out of the picture, Jason could potentially gain access to more money and continue his relationship with Vivi without fear of exposure. The detectives also discovered that Jason had recently purchased a large quantity of the rare toxin found in Dave's system. Despite his calm exterior, Jason's admissions and potential motives made him a prime suspect. Detective Pestian knew they needed more evidence to either confirm or rule out his involvement in Dave's death. The investigation into Jason Marcherson was just beginning, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. As the detectives continued their investigation, they knew they had to dig deeper into Jason's personal life and his relationship with Vivi. The next steps would involve interviewing more people and looking for any inconsistencies in Jason's story. The truth was out there, and Detective Pestian and his team were committed to finding it. The detectives left no stone unturned, ensuring that every detail was examined and every lead followed. They were determined to bring justice for Dave Marcherson and uncover the true story behind his tragic death. On December 23, 2007, just 2 days before Christmas, the weather in Fishers, Indiana, was cold and overcast. Detective Billy Pestian received a call that would change the course of the investigation. New evidence had been found in Dave Marcherson's home. The discovery provided a crucial breakthrough in the case. Earlier that morning, a neighbor had noticed something unusual while walking her dog. She saw an envelope sticking out from under a flower pot on the Marchersons' porch. Curious, she picked it up and saw that it was addressed to Detective Pestian.
The neighbor immediately called the police, and Detective Pestian rushed to the scene. The envelope contained a letter and a small vial. The letter was unsigned but provided detailed information about the rare toxin found in Dave's system. The writer claimed to know who the killer was and provided specific details about how the toxin had been acquired and used. The letter also mentioned a hidden stash of documents in the Marchersons' attic that would reveal the true motive behind the murder. Detective Pestian and his team quickly obtained a warrant to search the attic. Inside, they found a lockbox. Using tools to carefully open it, they discovered several important documents, including financial records, personal letters, and a detailed plan outlining how the murder was to be carried out. The documents pointed to a well-planned conspiracy. Among the papers was a receipt for the purchase of the rare toxin, dated 2 months before Dave's death. The name on the receipt was Lana Marcherson, Dave's 24-year-old daughter. The detectives were shocked by this revelation, as Lana had not been a primary suspect up until this point. The new evidence painted a different picture of the crime. Detective Pestian and his team reviewed the documents thoroughly, uncovering Lana's hidden motives. The letters revealed her deep jealousy over Jason's relationship with Vivi and her desire to remove her father from the picture to gain control over the family's finances and the event planning business she co-owned with Vivi. The police responded to this new evidence by calling Lana in for further questioning. When confronted with the documents, Lana's demeanor changed from cooperative to defensive. She denied any involvement at first, but eventually broke down under pressure, revealing the extent of her involvement in the plot. Detective Pestian knew they were getting closer to solving the case. The new evidence provided a clear motive and linked Lana directly to the crime. The police continued to gather more information, determined to bring justice to Dave Marcherson's tragic death. The third suspect in the case was Lana Marcherson, Dave's 24-year-old daughter. Lana was a pragmatic and ambitious young woman who co-owned an event planning business with Vivi. She was known for her hard work and dedication, and she was fiercely loyal to Vivi. However, her jealousy and complex emotions added a layer of intrigue to the case. On December 24, 2007, Detective Billy Pestian and his team called Lana in for further questioning. It was Christmas Eve, and the weather outside was cold with a light snow falling. The festive decorations at the police station stood in stark contrast to the serious atmosphere of the interrogation room. Lana arrived at the station, visibly nervous but trying to maintain her composure. Detective Pestian began the interrogation by asking Lana about her relationship with her father. Lana described her father as loving and supportive, but admitted they have their differences, especially regarding the family business and her personal life. When Detective Pestian brought up the newly discovered documents, Lana's demeanor shifted. She became defensive, denying any involvement in her father's death. However, the detectives presented her with the receipt for the rare toxin, which bore her name. The evidence was overwhelming, and Lana's story began to unravel. Lana eventually confessed to her part in the plot. She admitted to feeling jealous of her brother Jason's relationship with Vivi and her father's control over the family's finances. Lana saw an opportunity to gain control over the business and her father's estate by eliminating it. She had supplied Vivi with the rare toxin, encouraging her to use it to poison Dave. The detectives were stunned by Lana's cold and calculated confession. She revealed how she had manipulated both Vivi and Jason to achieve her goals. Her jealousy and ambition had driven her to commit a heinous crime, betraying her own family in the process. Lana's motive became clear. She wanted to remove her father from the picture to gain financial control and to keep Vivi for herself. Her unrequited love for Vivi and jealousy of Jason's relationship with her fueled her actions. Lana's confession provided the final piece of the puzzle, linking her directly to the crime and revealing her as the true mastermind behind the murder. Detective Pestian and his team were now confident they had uncovered the full extent of the plot. Lana's detailed confession, along with the physical evidence, provided a clear picture of her involvement. The investigation into Lana Marcherson revealed a chilling tale of jealousy, manipulation, and betrayal, bringing them closer to solving the tragic case. On December 25, 2007, the weather in Fishers, Indiana, was cold and snowy. It was Christmas morning, and the town was quiet. Detective Billy Pestian and his team had gathered enough evidence to identify the murderer. The killer was Vivi Marcherson, Dave's 19-year-old wife. Her motives were a mix of desperation to escape her loveless marriage and a desire to be with her stepson, Jason. Vivi's plan was meticulously crafted. She had purchased a rare toxin with the help of Lana, Dave's daughter.
Vivi then mixed the poison into Dave's favorite evening tea. The poison caused a slow and painful death, which initially appeared natural due to its subtle symptoms. Vivi thought she had planned the perfect crime, but the evidence told a different story. Detective Pestian reviewed the evidence one last time before heading to the Martrisson home to make the arrest. Vivi had become the primary suspect after Lana's confession. The detailed plan found in the attic, the toxicology report, and the receipt for the rare toxin all pointed to Vivi's involvement. The detectives were ready to bring her to justice. As Detective Pestian and his team approached the Martrisson home, they saw the festive Christmas lights twinkling. Despite the holiday cheer, the atmosphere was tense. The detectives knocked on the door, and Vivi answered, her face showing a mix of surprise and fear. "Vivi Martrisson, you are under arrest for the murder of Dave Martrisson," Detective Pestian announced. Vivi was shocked, but quickly composed herself. She was handcuffed and led to the police car, her neighbors watching in disbelief. At the police station, Vivi was questioned again. This time, with all the evidence laid out before her, she broke down and confessed. She admitted to poisoning Dave to be with Jason and escape her unhappy marriage. She also revealed that Jason had been blackmailing her for money to support his drug addiction. Feeling trapped and betrayed, Vivi had hoped that confessing might bring her some leniency. The reaction from Dave's family was a mix of relief and sorrow. His children, Jason and Lana, were devastated by the betrayal and loss. The neighbors and friends who had known the Martrissons were shocked to learn the truth. The small town of Fishers, Indiana, was rocked by the news of the murder and the dark secrets that had come to light. Vivi's arrest brought a sense of closure to the investigation. Detective Pestian and his team had worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. The case was a stark reminder of how jealousy and desperation could lead to tragic consequences. As Vivi was taken away, the town began to heal, knowing that justice had been served. The trial of Vivi Martrisson began on February 10, 2008, in Fishers, Indiana. The courtroom was filled with reporters, family members, and curious locals. The weather was cold and snowy, reflecting the somber mood inside. The prosecutor, Malia Jacobs-Chan, a 45-year-old seasoned attorney known for her determination and sharp wit, presented the case against Vivi. Malia Jacobs-Chan laid out the evidence methodically, explaining how Vivi had purchased the rare toxin with the help of Lana and used it to poison her husband, Dave. She described the financial and romantic motives, highlighting Vivi's desperation to escape her marriage and be with Jason. Jacobs called several witnesses, including Detective Billy Pestian, who detailed the investigation and the evidence found. The defense attorney, Mickey Mouse Brown, a 50-year-old with a reputation for defending tough cases, argued that Vivi was coerced by Jason and Lana. He painted Vivi as a victim of manipulation, desperate and frightened. Brown tried to cast doubt on the prosecution's timeline and motives, suggesting that Jason and Lana were the real masterminds. The courtroom was tense as the trial unfolded. Dave's family sat in the front row, their faces a mix of sadness and anger. They listened intently as both sides presented their arguments. The jury was visibly affected by the emotional testimonies and the detailed evidence. After several days of deliberation, the jury found Vivi Martrisson guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was announced on February 20, 2008. Vivi showed little emotion as the verdict was read, but her pale face and trembling hands revealed her fear. The judge sentenced Vivi to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence brought a sense of justice to Dave's family, though the pain of losing him remained. The impact of the trial and verdict rippled through the community. Dave's children, Jason and Lana, were deeply affected. Jason, already struggling with his drug addiction, found it hard to cope with the guilt and shame. Lana, despite her involvement, expressed remorse and cooperated with the authorities, which resulted in a lesser charge and a reduced sentence. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a tragic chapter for the Martrisson family. The small town of Fishers, Indiana, was left to grapple with the shocking events and the dark secrets that had come to light. The case was widely covered in the media, with news outlets and local stations providing extensive coverage of the trial and its aftermath. In the end, justice was served, but the scars left behind would take a long time to heal. The Martrisson family and the community of Fishers would forever remember the dark love triangle that led to Dave's tragic death. After the trial, life in Fishers, Indiana, slowly began to return to normal. However, for the Martrisson family, the aftermath of the murder left deep scars. Dave Martrisson's death and the trial of his wife, Vivi, had changed their lives forever. Jason Markerson, Dave's 25-year-old son, struggled the most. His drug addiction had worsened during the trial, and he had a hard time dealing with the guilt and shame of his involvement with Vivi. He checked into a rehabilitation center in Indianapolis, hoping to overcome his addiction and start anew. The path to recovery was long and challenging, but Jason was determined to turn his life around. Lana Markerson, Dave's 24-year-old daughter, faced her own set of challenges. Her role in the murder and the manipulation of Vivi had been exposed during the trial. Despite her cooperation with the authorities, she received a reduced sentence of 5 years in prison. Lana expressed deep remorse for her actions and planned to use her time in prison to reflect and rehabilitate. Vivi Markerson, now serving a like sentence, adapted to life behind bars. She spent her days reflecting on the choices that led to her imprisonment. Vivi joined a prison program that focused on education and personal growth. While she would never leave prison, she hoped to find some form of redemption. The town of Fishers, Indiana, slowly healed from the tragedy. The residents, who had been shocked by the events, came together to support one another. Community events and gatherings helped restore a sense of normalcy and unity. In the end, the tragic events surrounding Dave Markerson's death served as a stark reminder of the consequences of jealousy, betrayal, and desperation. The case had left a lasting impact on all those involved, but it also highlighted the importance of justice, redemption, and the strength of the human spirit. Today, we unravel the tragic and twisted tale of Jacob Rasmussen, a young man whose life was cut short in the opulent city of Naples, Florida, in August 2016. Jacob Rasmussen was a 20-year-old massage therapist living in Naples, Florida. Originally from a small town in Minnesota, Jacob had moved to Naples seeking better opportunities and a warmer climate. He was known for his good looks, athletic build, and charming personality, which quickly made him popular among his clients, especially of older women. Jacob had a knack for making people feel special, which helped him build a loyal client base. Jacob's charm and good looks also brought him into the world of sugar babies, where younger people enter into sexual relationships with older, wealthier individuals in exchange for gifts and financial support. Jacob had several sugar mommies, but his primary one was Veronica Hayes, a 59-year-old astrologist. While Jacob enjoyed the benefits of these relationships, they also inevitably brought complications and tensions. In the days leading up to his death, Jacob was excited about his future. He had recently received a generous gift from one of his clients, an Audi SUV, which he proudly showed off to his friends. He was also planning a trip to Disney World with some of his friends, something he had been looking forward to for months. Jacob's Instagram was filled with posts about his plans, from pictures of his new car to countdowns to his Disney trip. Despite these complexities, Jacob remained optimistic and full of life. He was known for his infectious smile and positive attitude. Friends and clients alike admired his ambition and drive. Jacob's life, filled with dreams and plans, would be cut short, though, in a tragic and shocking way. On the morning of August 12, 2016, Jacob Rasmussen's neighbor, Linda Martino, started her day like any other. Linda was a 95-year-old retired school teacher from Brooklyn who lived next door to Jacob in their Naples, Florida apartment complex. She often chatted with Jacob and had become concerned when she noticed his car, a shiny new Audi SUV, hadn't moved in 2 weeks. Linda thought it was odd because Jacob usually had a busy schedule. Around 9 a.m., Linda decided to check on Jacob. She knocked on his door, but got no answer. Worried, she used the spare key Jacob had given her for emergencies. As soon as she opened the door, she felt something was wrong. The apartment was too quiet, and a faint, unpleasant smell filled the air. Linda called out Jacob's name, but there was no response. She walked through the living room and into the hallway. When she reached the bathroom, she saw a horrifying sight. Jacob was lying face down in the toilet, naked. His head was submerged in the water, and his body was limp. Linda screamed and backed away, her heart racing. Shaking, Linda ran back to her apartment and called 911. Her voice trembled as she explained what she had found. "I think my neighbor is dead," she told the operator. "He's in his bathroom, and it looks like something happened to him." The 911 operator stayed on the line with Linda, trying to keep her calm until the police arrived. Linda was in shock, pacing back and forth in her apartment and glancing nervously at Jacob's door. She couldn't believe what she had seen. Just a few days ago, Jacob had been full of life, talking about his plans to visit Disney World and showing off his new car. Within minutes, The Naples Police Department arrived at the scene. Officers secured the area and began their investigation. Linda was asked to wait outside while the police did their work. She sat on a bench, shaking and holding her head in her hands, trying to process the tragic event. News of Jacob's death quickly spread through the apartment complex. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering and speculating about what had happened. The local news soon picked up the story, with reporters arriving to cover the shocking discovery. Cameras captured the scene, showing the police presence and the concerned faces of the residents. Jacob's sudden and violent death left everyone in shock, especially those who knew him well. He was young, full of potential, and had a bright future ahead. Now his life was tragically cut short, and his friends and family were left to mourn the loss. The Naples Police Department arrived quickly at the scene after Linda Martino's 911 call on August 12, 2016. Detective Samuel Jenkins led the investigation. He was known for his attention to detail and had solved many high-profile cases. His partner, Officer Karen Blake, was known for her sharp intuition and calm demeanor. As they entered Jacob Rasmussen's apartment, the officers immediately noticed the eerie silence. The living room was tidy, with no signs of a struggle. A flat-screen TV was on the wall, and a few magazines, including the latest issue of GQ, were on the coffee table. The apartment looked normal, but the unsettling smell hinted at something more sinister. Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake moved cautiously toward the bathroom, where Jacob's body was found. The bathroom was small, with white tiles and a modern shower. Jacob's naked body was slumped over the toilet, his head submerged in the water. There were no visible signs of a break-in, and nothing seemed out of place, but the scene was disturbing. Jacob had been drowned. His head had been forced into the toilet, and there were bruises on his arms and neck, indicating a struggle. Detective Jenkins noted the position of the body and the bruising pattern, suggesting that Jacob had fought back against his attacker. The bathroom itself was clean, with no blood or other obvious evidence. The police began their methodical investigation. They took photographs of the entire apartment, collected fingerprints, and searched for any possible clues. They found a set of kitchen knives, but none appeared to be missing. Officer Blake found Jacob's phone on the kitchen counter. It was a new model, an iPhone 6S, and it might hold valuable information. She carefully bagged it for further analysis. Detective Jenkins and his team interviewed neighbors, including Linda Martino, to gather more information about Jacob's recent activities and any potential visitors. Linda mentioned seeing a few of Jacob's clients come and go, but nothing seemed unusual. She also noted the new Audi SUV Jacob had received recently. The forensic team arrived and began their examination of the body and the apartment. They used luminol to check for traces of blood, even in areas that appeared clean. They also checked for hair, fibers, and other small pieces of evidence that might have been left behind by the attacker. As the investigation progressed, the police began to piece together a timeline of Jacob's last hours. They hoped that his phone and the security cameras in the apartment complex might provide additional clues. The clean state of the apartment and the lack of obvious evidence suggested that the killer had taken great care to cover their tracks. The tragic scene at Jacob's apartment marked the beginning of a complex investigation. Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake knew they had a difficult case ahead of them. They were determined to find out who was responsible for the young man's untimely death and bring them to justice. The first suspect in the investigation was Veronica Hayes, a 59-year-old astrologist. Veronica was well known in Naples for her larger-than-life personality and her impressive client list, which included several celebrities. She lived in a lavish mansion decorated with exotic crystals and zodiac signs. Veronica had a reputation for being generous, often gifting expensive items to her friends and clients. However, she was also known to be possessive and obsessive, especially in her personal relationships. It was no secret Veronica had been in a sexual relationship with Jacob Rasmussen, acting as his sugar mommy. She showered him with gifts, including the 70-inch flat-screen TV found in his house. When the police first questioned Veronica, she was calm but visibly upset. She admitted to being deeply hurt when she discovered that Jacob had been seeing other women. Despite her feelings, she denied any involvement in his death. Detective Samuel Jenkins and Officer Karen Blake conducted the interrogation. They were careful and thorough, asking Veronica about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Veronica claimed, like a typical Virgo, she was at home, alone, reading the latest issue of Astrology Today and meditating. She insisted she had not seen Jacob for several days before his death and respected his need for privacy as a Scorpio. The police dug deeper into Veronica's background. They found that she had a history of intense relationships, including 3 failed marriages, that often ended badly, something she readily admitted to, saying she couldn't help it as someone with their moon in Cancer. Former friends and clients described her as charming but controlling. Several mentioned that Veronica Cancer moon could make her very jealous, especially when she felt betrayed. This gave the police a possible motive for her to harm Jacob. During the interrogation, Veronica's demeanor shifted. She became more defensive and agitated, particularly when asked about her relationship with Jacob. She accused the police of unfairly targeting her because of her wealth, high-profile lifestyle, and belief in astrology. Despite her protests, the police continued to press her for details. The police also examined Veronica's phone records. They found multiple calls and text messages to Jacob in the days leading up to his death. Some of the messages were affectionate, while others were increasingly profane, vicious, desperate, and accusatory. This evidence painted a picture of a relationship that was unraveling, with Veronica struggling to maintain control. Despite the mounting evidence and Veronica's increasingly erratic behavior, there was no direct proof linking her to the crime scene. The police needed more concrete evidence to make an arrest. As the investigation continued, Veronica remained a key suspect, her actions and history keeping her under close scrutiny. The second suspect the police investigated was Bryony Mitchell Keynes, a 68-year-old Australian millionaire with quite the shocking backstory. Bryony had recently moved to Naples after facing legal trouble in Australia after a newspaper published allegations showing Bryony allegedly trafficking asylum seekers to work in her restaurant's chain for, quote, subhuman wages. Known for her outgoing and vivacious personality, Bryony was also fiercely protective of her friends and had a temper that could flare up unexpectedly. Bryony had started a sexual relationship with Jacob Rasmussen shortly before his death. As another of his sugar mommies, she was generous, giving him expensive gifts, including the Audi SUV he received just before he died. When the police questioned Bryony, she was cooperative but guarded. She acknowledged her relationship with Jacob and expressed shock at his death. Detective Samuel Jenkins and Officer Karen Blake led the interrogation. They asked Bryony about her activities on the night Jacob was killed. Bryony stated she had been at Naked Masquerade Ball at the Naples Grande Beach Resort, mingling with other wealthy attendees and enjoying the evening. She provided the names of several people who could confirm her alibi, including local business owners and socialites. During the interrogation, Bryony remained composed, but her demeanor shifted when asked about Jacob's other relationships. She seemed irritated and defensive, insisting she had no idea about his involvement with other women. The police found her reaction suspicious, as it hinted at possible jealousy and a motive for harming Jacob. Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake searched Bryony's home for any evidence linking her to the crime. They found several expensive gifts she had planned to give Jacob, including a jet ski, an air hockey table, and a PlayStation 4, indicating her deep investment in their relationship. In addition, they saw several large withdrawals from her bank account in the weeks leading up to Jacob's death. While this alone was not incriminating, it suggested she was heavily involved in Jacob's life and willing to spend significant amounts of money on him. They also discovered a series of text messages between Bryony and Jacob. The messages started flirty but became more intense, with Bryony expressing frustration over Jacob's lack of commitment. Despite Bryony's cooperation and strong alibi, the police remained suspicious of her involvement. Her intense feelings for Jacob and possible jealousy provided a motive, but like with Veronica Hayes, there was no direct evidence linking her to the murder. As the investigation continued, Bryony's actions and connections to Jacob kept her under close watch by the authorities. The third suspect in the investigation was Marcus Dean, a 21-year-old who had been in a rivalry with Jacob Rasmussen. Marcus was known in Naples for being competitive and ambitious. He was also a sugar baby, catering to wealthy, married couples bored with their humdrum sex life. Marcus was driven to be the best in his circle, always striving to outdo his peers in sexual performance and number of sugar parents. His personality was described as hot-headed, and he had a history of getting into arguments and fights, often fueled by alcohol. The police questioned Marcus shortly after Jacob's body was found. Detective Samuel Jenkins and Officer Karen Blake led the interrogation, focusing on the nature of Marcus and Jacob's relationship. Marcus admitted that he and Jacob had been rivals, both vying for the attention and gifts of the same wealthy women. He described their relationship as tense but insisted it was all part of the competition. On the night of Jacob's death, Marcus claimed he was at a local bar, Patty Murphy's, with friends, celebrating a recent orgy request with some wealthy couples. He provided the names of his friends who could confirm his alibi. However, Marcus's reputation for getting into fights after drinking raised suspicions about his possible involvement in Jacob's death. The police dug into Marcus's background, finding numerous reports of altercations with other sugar babies and clients. Many described Marcus as aggressive and quick to anger, especially when he felt threatened or disrespected. This temperament, combined with his rivalry with Jacob, gave the police a potential motive for murder. During the interrogation, Marcus initially remained calm, but became defensive when asked about his whereabouts and relationship with Jacob. He denied any involvement in Jacob's death and accused the police of trying to pin the crime on him due to their rivalry. His agitation grew as the questioning continued, suggesting he was hiding something. Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake searched Marcus's apartment for evidence. They found a few items linking him to Jacob, including a gold chain that Jacob had posted about on social media, saying it was a gift from a client. The police also discovered a series of text messages between Marcus and Jacob. The messages revealed escalating tensions, with Marcus accusing Jacob of stealing his clients and threatening to teach that bleep a bleeping lesson. The police also reviewed security footage from Patty Murphy's on the night of Jacob's death. The footage confirmed Marcus's presence at the bar, but there was a 2-hour gap where Marcus was unaccounted for. This window of time raised further suspicion, as it was enough time for him to commit the crime and return to the bar. Despite the mounting evidence and Marcus's suspicious behavior, there was still no direct proof linking him to Jacob's murder. The police continued to keep Marcus under close watch, hoping to uncover more information that could either confirm or clear their suspicions. On August 18, 2016, 6 days after Jacob Rasmussen's body was found, the Naples Police Department received a breakthrough. The day was hot and sunny, with temperatures soaring into the mid-90s. Detective Samuel Jenkins and Officer Karen Blake were in the police station when they received a call from a local pawn shop owner who had found something unusual while inventorying recently pawned items. He told the police that a gold bracelet, inscribed with the initials JAR, had been pawned 2 days before Jacob's death. Jacob had posted a picture of this same bracelet on his social media, saying it was a gift from a client. The police immediately headed to the pawn shop, located on 5th Avenue South, a busy area filled with shops and restaurants. At the pawn shop, records showed that the bracelet had been pawned by Marcus Dean. This new evidence placed Marcus at the center of the investigation once again. Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake were determined to dig deeper. The police brought Marcus back in for questioning. This time, they confronted him with the evidence of the bracelet. Marcus's demeanor shifted from defensive to visibly nervous. He stumbled over his words as he tried to explain why he had the bracelet. Marcus claimed that Jacob had given it to him as a gift, but the police were skeptical given their contentious history. Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake also reviewed security footage from the pawn shop. The footage clearly showed Marcus entering the shop and pawning the bracelet. The timestamp on the video matched the date on the transaction records, leaving little doubt about Marcus's actions. The police used this footage to challenge Marcus's story further. The police also re-examined the security footage from Patty Murphy's bar on the night of Jacob's death. They discovered that Marcus had left the bar for 2 hours, providing him with enough time to commit the crime. This new evidence painted a clearer picture of Marcus's possible involvement in Jacob's murder. With the bracelet, the threatening text messages, and the suspicious gap in Marcus's alibi, the police felt they had enough to proceed. Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake presented their findings to the district attorney, who agreed that the evidence was compelling. The police were now focused on gathering more information to strengthen their case against Marcus. They continued to interview witnesses and piece together the events leading up to Jacob's death, determined to bring justice for the young man whose life was tragically cut short. On August 22, 2016, the Naples Police Department made a breakthrough in Jacob Rasmussen's murder case. Detective Samuel Jenkins and Officer Karen Blake had gathered enough evidence to identify the murderer, Veronica Hayes. Veronica, a 59-year-old astrologist, was known for her extravagant lifestyle and powerful personality. Despite her public charm, she had a dark, obsessive side, especially in her relationships. The investigation revealed that Veronica's obsession with Jacob had grown dangerously intense. She was furious when she discovered that Jacob was seeing other older women for sex and receiving expensive gifts from them.
including the Audi SUV from Bryony Mitchell Keynes. Veronica's jealousy and anger boiled over on the night of August 1, 2016. On that night, Veronica confronted Jacob at his apartment about his new car. An argument erupted, and in a fit of rage, Veronica drowned Jacob in his own toilet. She forced his head into the water until he stopped struggling, leaving bruises on his arms and neck. To humiliate him further and make it look like he drowned himself, she stripped off his clothes, making the scene appear even more degrading. Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake pieced together the events through witness statements, security footage, and forensic evidence. Veronica's alibi, which claimed she was home reading Mistrology today and meditating, fell apart when phone records showed she was near Jacob's apartment at the time of the murder. Furthermore, forensic analysis of Veronica's clothing revealed traces of Jacob's blood, linking her directly to the crime scene. On the morning of August 22, the police moved in to arrest Veronica. They arrived at her mansion, a grand estate adorned with astrological symbols and crystals. Veronica was taken by surprise, her confident demeanor cracking as she was handcuffed and led to the police car. She protested loudly, accusing the police of targeting her because of her wealth and status. The arrest sent shockwaves through the Naples community. Jacob's family, who had been devastated by his death, felt a mix of relief and sorrow. They were grateful that the murderer had been caught, but heartbroken over the senseless loss of their son. Veronica's friends and clients were equally shocked, struggling to reconcile the generous woman they knew with the brutal crime she had committed. Veronica Hayes was charged with second-degree murder. Her trial would reveal more about the dark side of her personality and the tragic obsession that led her to take Jacob's life. The arrest marked a crucial step in the quest for justice, but the journey was far from over. Veronica Hayes' trial for the murder of Jacob Rasmussen began in October 2016. The courtroom was packed with journalists, community members, and activists. The case had drawn national attention, with many people intrigued by the bizarre astrology defense Veronica used. She claimed she was being discriminated against because she was a Virgo, a sign known for being meticulous and perfectionistic. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Martin Delgado, argued that Veronica's obsession with Jacob had driven her to murder. Delgado, a 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough on crime, presented the evidence collected by Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake. He showed the jury the phone records placing Veronica near Jacob's apartment, the forensic evidence linking her to the scene, and the bruises on Jacob's body indicating a struggle. Delgado painted a picture of a woman consumed by jealousy and rage, who had meticulously planned and executed the murder. He called witnesses who testified about Veronica's possessive nature and her increasing anger towards Jacob's other relationships. Delgado's argument was clear. Veronica's jealousy had turned deadly. The defense attorney, Nancy Price, took a different approach. Price, a 50-year-old known for her unconventional tactics, focused on the so-called astrology defense. She argued that Veronica was being unfairly targeted because of her zodiac sign. Price brought in experts who testified about Virgo characteristics, emphasizing that Veronica's actions were influenced by her astrological traits rather than a criminal mindset. Veronica herself took the stand, carefully claiming that she was a victim of discrimination. She insisted she had no intention of killing Jacob and that the incident was a tragic accident. Her testimony was supported by groups like Virgos United and Americans Against Birth Sign Discrimination, who protested outside the courthouse throughout the trial. They held signs demanding fair treatment for all astrological signs and decrying the injustice against Virgos. Despite the prosecution's strong case, the jury was swayed by the defense's argument. On November 15, 2016, Veronica was found guilty of manslaughter instead of murder. The judge sentenced her to 10 years in prison, a decision that shocked many who had expected a harsher punishment. Jacob's family was devastated by the verdict. They felt that justice had not been served and that Veronica's wealth and influence had played a role in her lighter sentence. Friends and supporters of Jacob were equally outraged, feeling that the trial had turned into a spectacle rather than a pursuit of justice. Veronica's supporters celebrated the verdict, viewing it as a victory against astrological discrimination. The trial and its outcomes sparked widespread debate about the role of unconventional defenses in the legal system and the influence of public opinion on judicial decisions. After Veronica Hayes' trial ended, the lives of everyone involved were changed significantly. Veronica began serving her 10-year sentence at the Florida Women's Reception Center, a medium-security prison located in Ocala. Her trial had drawn considerable media attention, and she became a controversial figure. She continued to claim she was a victim of discrimination due to her astrological sign, using the prison's library to write letters and articles about her experience. Her case remained a topic of discussion in astrological and legal circles. Jacob Rasmussen's family in Minnesota struggled to cope with the outcome of the trial. They felt the 10-year sentence was too lenient for a crime as brutal as Jacob's murder. The media frequently covered their reactions, highlighting their disappointment and grief. They continued to advocate for harsher penalties for crimes of this nature and sought to keep Jacob's memory alive through community events and online memorials.
Marcus Dean, who had been a suspect in the case, faced continued scrutiny from the public. Though he was cleared of any involvement in Jacob's murder, his reputation was tarnished by his rivalry with Jacob and his history of altercations. He struggled to find work and had to deal with the fallout from the media coverage, which painted him as a potential murderer. Bryony Mitchell Keynes, another suspect, returned to Australia and faced her own challenges. The negative publicity from the cases affected her restaurant business, and she dealt with backlash from customers and critics. Bryony continued to live a quiet life, trying to distance herself from the controversy surrounding the case. The murder of Jacob Rasmussen and the subsequent trial had a lasting impact on everyone involved. It brought attention to issues of justice and discrimination, and left a mark on the community of Naples, Florida. The case became a cautionary tale about the influence of personal biases and unconventional defenses in the legal system.